It was a quiet evening when I sat down at my kitchen table, the faint smell of roasted vegetables still clinging to the air, a comforting reminder of the dinner I had enjoyed alone after a long day. I was scrolling through my phone when a message from an acquaintance, Anna, popped up, asking if she could come over for a casual get-together. My fingers hesitated over the screen, thoughts racing back to a party last month where Anna, with her bright smile and bubbly personality, made a bombastic introduction that was quickly overshadowed by her confession. She referred to herself as a total klepto. At the time, I had chuckled along with the other guests, brushing it off as a quirky exaggeration, but her subsequent actions raised hair on my neck. I watched, uneasy, as she slipped a bottle of wine into her bag and, just before leaving, rifled through my collection of vintage postcards while distracted by conversation. I knew I should have said something then, it would have been a golden opportunity for a teachable moment, but the laughter of friends masked my instincts as I let it slide. Now, as I read her message, I felt the familiar knot tighten in my stomach. I typed a hesitant response, explaining that I had plans for the weekend and wouldn't be able to host her. Each word felt like a half-truth, a feeble wall I was trying to erect against an uninvited chaos. After sending it, I sank into an uneasy silence, replaying the moment she had look of glee when she thought no one was watching, a sort of childlike delight in taking things that weren't hers. The truth was, I didn't want that kind of energy in my home, a space I had worked hard to make a sanctuary. I loved the little treasures I had collected over the years, the mismatched teacups, the faded photographs, and the mere idea of them being subject to her klepto nature made me shudder. Days passed after my refusal, but the unease lingered like an unwelcoming guest. Our mutual friends began to ask about my decision. They wanted to know why I hadn't invited Anna, often couching their questions in a concern that felt almost mocking, as if I were the unreasonable one who had denied a friend simple hospitality. "It's just a joke, you know?" one of them remarked, laughter dancing at the edges of his voice as we stood by a fruity punch bowl. "You can't take it seriously." But I couldn't shake off the feeling. I started to wonder if I was being a bit too harsh, a bit too closed off, yet I felt the sting of their laughter in a way that didn't match my situation. Then came a text I hadn't anticipated. Anna reached out to me again, this time apologizing for her past behavior and inviting me to discuss it over coffee. A part of me wanted to engage, to hear her thoughts and perhaps offer her the understanding I had assumed she lacked. Yet another part remained on guard, caution spilling into the forefront of my mind, warning me of potential manipulation. I chose ambiguity, suggesting that we meet in a public space, something casual, allowing me to maintain the physical distance my heart craved. When the day came, we met in a quaint little cafe, the air thick with the smell of freshly baked pastries. Anna walked in, her demeanor had shifted, the confidence seemed tempered by uncertainty, her usual flamboyance stripped down to a fragile humility. She ordered a latte, and as our small talk veered into deeper waters, I found myself listening intently, her eyes pleading for comprehension, her remorse tinged with vulnerability. She spoke of her addiction, her battles with impulse control, her admission that the label klepto was more of a coping mechanism than a joke. I felt my own walls begin to crack, an understanding blossoming within the fissures of my guarded heart. It became evident that her light-hearted banter often masked a turbulent history, a story that I hadn't anticipated digging beneath the surface. I left that meeting not with a resolution but with a renewed sense of compassion towards someone I had judged too quickly. Maybe I wasn't the asshole after all, but perhaps I was merely wrapped in the confines of my own fears. Eventually, as I navigated my way through my own thoughts, I decided to reach out again. I recorded a message for Anna, saying I'd like to try again, inviting her for a small gathering with a few close friends. It felt right, a balance of caution and empathy, a tentative step toward bridging the space I had drawn between us. Several weeks later, I would look back at that moment of choosing to create a connection rather than a rift. I realized something profound about people: we are all carrying unseeable burdens, and sometimes, understanding is the most potent remedy we can offer. Update: a few months have passed since our reconnection, and Anna has slowly proven herself to be a dear friend, one who respects my space and has taken steps toward managing her impulses. She even surprised me at my birthday party with a thoughtful, hand-picked gift from my favorite bookstore, something I never would have thought possible when the conversation first unfolded in that cafe. As it turns out, both our experiences shaped a new port of calm in the stormy seas of uncertainty. It had reminded me that sometimes the most unsettling moments can lead to the strongest of bonds. As I reflect on the months that have passed since that pivotal decision, I can't help but marvel at how far Anna and I have come. There was a time when the thought of letting her into my life again felt risky, as if I were teetering on the edge of a cliff. It was easy to envision scenarios where her past tendencies would rear their heads, leading to a cascade of mistrust and awkward moments. However, I've come to understand that letting her in required a vulnerability I hadn't expected to offer, not just to her, but to myself. With each casual meeting, be it over coffee at our favorite little cafe or an impromptu movie night at my place, I noticed the subtle shifts. In our conversations, the laughter now echoed with a reserved familiarity rather than tension and caution. Anna sincerely worked on herself, eagerly sharing her progress and the strategies she was implementing to curb her impulses. Each time she showed up with a new accomplishment or insight, my heart melted just a bit more, swelling with awe for her courage and determination to change. One evening, as we curled up on my couch with blankets piled high and an array of snacks scattered around like a makeshift feast, our laughter filled the room, mingling seamlessly with the soft glow of the lamp casting golden shadows on the walls. It felt like home in a way I had nearly forgotten, a sanctuary where two people could be honest about their flaws without fear of judgment. I remember teasing her about her initial tendency to swipe something, a fine-looking postcard or a quirky pen, when she got overly excited. She playfully rolled her eyes, recounting a story about a time she had unintentionally taken an unusual clay figurine from a friend's house, only to return it a few days later, embarrassed and ashamed. We both laughed, and it struck me how that shared moment of vulnerability forged an even stronger connection. Her self-awareness illuminated a warmth in my heart. It was during one of those cozy evenings that I proposed we visit her old neighborhood, the neighborhood she had grown up in, just to see how things had changed. To my surprise, she agreed. As we strolled through the familiar streets, Anna pointed out buildings and shops, relaying stories from her childhood that were both endearing and bittersweet. There was a sense of nostalgia that enveloped us, and I could feel a deeper understanding blooming between us as we walked under the fluttering leaves of the trees lining the sidewalks. Anna spoke vividly about her dreams and aspirations, the very ones that had often been stifled by her earlier behavior, and in that moment, I glimpsed a new layer of her, the possibility of uncharted horizons, a future reshaped by newfound accountability. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Just last week, while I was out running errands, I received a frantic text from Anna, sharing how she had just been at a local busy store and felt drawn in by the rush of excitement, a familiar tension brewing within her. I could sense her panic through the screen as she admitted having slipped a decorative mug into her bag, her heart racing as she navigated the ethics of her actions in real time. My stomach twisted, I felt a flash of empathy mixed with fear. Part of me worried, was this my fault for encouraging her too much too quickly? Only moments passed before my phone buzzed again, and I read her message thanking me for being there. She confessed that when she reached her car, panic bubbled up inside her, urging her to overcome the old impulse, yet this time she chose differently. She pressed her palm against the mug, emerging as the person she aspired to be, her pulse steadying as she marched back inside to return it. I felt endless pride for her courage, and it served as a pivotal reminder of why I let her back into my life. Now, as I sit here reflecting on our journey, I realize how beautifully intertwined our lives have become. While Anna may carry the label of a total klepto in moments of levity, she is so much more than that one chapter. She is a testament to resilience, transforming an unsettling part of her identity into a space of growth and self-awareness. And who she is now, the person she has become, inspires kindness and connection in ways I genuinely didn't believe possible. Perhaps in forging a connection based on our mutual struggles, we inadvertently carved out a bond that scaffolded our souls in the chaos of living. As I look ahead, I can't help but feel curiosity for what lies down this uncharted path for us. Whatever it may be, together, we are embracing it. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself reflecting often on that crisp autumn day when Anna sat across from me in the little cafe, her admission hanging in the air like a caustic perfume. I had braced myself for the storm that conversation could have unleashed, but instead, it had gently nudged open the door to an unexpected friendship. One chilly evening, as golden leaves swirled around outside my window, Anna and I sat curled up in my living room, a stack of books scattered between us, the soft glow of fairy lights illuminating the cozy space. We were laughing about our most recent adventure, her brave decision to swap out her usual baked goods for fruit and nuts at a local market, a small victory in her ongoing journey of self-regulation. Each jest carried the weight of our shared laughter and love, a testament to how far she had come since our initial meeting. I watched her, marveling at the way her eyes sparkled with pride at her choices, something I often found myself nurturing in her as she shared anecdotes about her past mishaps. It was strange to think that just months prior, I had been wary of her presence, needing to protect my own space from the chaos of her admitted kleptomania. Yet here we were, two souls in tandem, navigating the bumps of our own imperfections. In the quiet moments, I could feel vulnerability wrap around us like a warm blanket, stitching together the tearing seams of our uncertainties. We talked about the moments that had defined us, her experiences reflected in mine, and it became clear that both of us had worn masks before finally discovering a safe haven in each other. There were still echoes of the past, rumblings beneath the surface that reminded us of our journeys. Sometimes, I would catch a flicker of darkness clouding her face, a shadow of temptation that whispered if only it could persuade her just once more. But instead of fear, I felt a rush of empathy swell inside me. I had seen her taking strides, how she carried around little reminders of her commitment, like a bracelet that she fidgeted with during tense moments, a grounding anchor amid her chaotic thoughts. These days, her voices of the past had transformed from torturous howls into whispered echoes of encouragement. We had both come to recognize that acceptance doesn't mean surrendering to our flaws, but rather, learning to dance with them amid the music of life, struggling less against the rhythm and finding our own beat. With every passing day, curiosity about our future mingled with uncertainty, a blend of excitement and trepidation that accompanied me whenever I thought of where this connection might lead. We began exploring new hobbies together, pottery classes that left our hands muddied yet creative, bookshop visits where conversations would tumble into the air like soft whispers. Each activity strengthened our bond, and it became increasingly hard to imagine my life without Anna's infectious laughter. One balmy winter evening, as we sat close in front of the flickering fireplace, our shared warmth seemed to wrap around us like the flames dancing in the hearth. Anna turned to me, her voice quiet but steady. "You know, I've learned so much from you, not to be afraid of the messy parts of our lives." I found that I had learned just as much from her, how authentic friendships could coax us out of our hidden corners and inspire bravery where we once only felt fear. It was then I realized what we were building together was not simply companionship, it felt like crafting a safe haven, a gathering point for two afraid hearts trying to rewrite their narratives. Still, as thoughts of what lay ahead lingered in the back of my mind, I understood that even within this sea of calm, the tides could shift with the slightest change. Our bond felt strong, almost etched in stone, yet challenges were part of life's intricate design, woven delicately into each sunset. As I nestled deeper into the warmth of our moments like these, I recognized that every twist in this journey would further color our story, each chapter rich with experience, growth, and perhaps an occasional storm. Yet through the tempest, I felt a newfound certainty that, no matter what, Anna and I were committed to weathering it together, brave enough to embrace whatever was waiting around the corner. I carry pumpkin seeds in my pocket and plant them everywhere I go. I've been doing this for over 20 years. It started innocently enough on a late autumn afternoon when I was wandering through my grandmother's garden, her breathy laugh dancing with the wind as she taught me how to cultivate the earth. She handed me a small handful of pumpkin seeds, each one a promise of future harvests, and said something that stuck with me: "Everything you plant has the power to change the world, however small." I didn't think much of it at the time, but as the seasons passed, that simple notion began to nourish my growing fascination with seeds, the cycles of life, and the hidden beauty of nurturing potential in unlikely places. Whenever I found myself in a new city or town, I would pause when I felt that familiar stirring in my heart, an urge to plant. It was never about pumpkins, really, it was about legacy, connection, and perhaps a poorly buried grief that thought I could never nurture something as beautiful as my grandmother once did. I wanted to remind the world that little things can grow into something remarkable. I wanted my grandmother's spirit to linger through those tender sprouts. As the years rolled on, I turned into something of an urban legend among my closest friends, like the mystical gardener planting life where it seemed to have none. My pocket always brimmed with tiny seeds, ready at a moment's whim. The sound of someone cursing a barren landscape would find me surreptitiously dropping a few seeds in that neglected plot of land, or softly pressing them into the dirt beside a crumbling sidewalk. I found joy in imagining the tiny plants breaking through the cement, whispering their defiance, and offering hope to strangers passing by. But a peculiar shift appeared when I stumbled upon my usual spot along a forgotten park bench one cold evening. I often took my time to plant a few seeds here, watching the way children would laugh and play nearby, and being enveloped in that comforting ambience of life unfurling around me. This time, however, I noticed a figure lingering at the edge of the trees, a woman with sharp eyes that seemed to hypnotize even the bravest of stars. I felt a twinge of unease. She didn't seem to notice the jovial laughter or the laughter of children. She merely stood, blinking slowly as if weighing the world from a distance. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached her, introducing myself with the confidence that only comes from years of believing in something. She listened, but her gaze flicked not to me, but to my hand, the hand that held the seeds tightly like a secret. "You shouldn't be planting seeds here," she said, her voice layered with an underlying imperceptible frustration. I was taken aback. Who was this stranger to question my life's mission? But there was a peculiar gravity in her voice, a sense that she understood something I did not. Despite feeling hurt, I wanted to understand her reasoning, so I asked her why not. And with an intensity that felt like a storm cloud gathering in the distance, she warned me that not all seeds are meant to take root. Some spaces are dormant for a reason, cursed perhaps by sorrow or tragedy. I was confused. Surely my grandmother's legacy couldn't disrupt the delicate balance of the world. Yet, somewhere deep in my heart, her warning lodged itself like a splinter. Days turned into weeks, and though my pocket remained heavy with unplanted seeds, I couldn't shake off that unsettling feeling. Other whispers began to creep in, mostly from friends who casually mentioned odd occurrences tied to previously nurtured patches. Flowers withered too soon, plants grew with unnatural shapes, and urban myths of a spectral gardener emerged. The story spoke of lurking shadows that appeared in gardens where I had planted my seeds, stories that echoed with memories I hoped were long buried. I wrestled with my thoughts, feeling both the ache of loyalty to my grandmother's tradition and the twinge of guilt with every seed I pocketed but never planted, battling against the storm of whether to continue or cease this ritual connecting me to her. Finally, one rainy evening, I returned to the park, carried by memories both joyful and morose, and that woman was waiting beside the bench, her expression revealing nothing but the lines of concern etched across her brow. Without a word, I drew the few remaining seeds from my pocket, palms outstretched as if surrendering to the unseeable force around us. Plant them, but not here. Let them go into the world where they might find better ground. A sense of relief washed over me, unexpected and soft as the pouring rain embraced the earth, and I fled from that park, knowing I'd have to seek new territories, new sanctuaries to honor the promise I once made. As the years flowed, I became a traveler in search of places where every seed could thrive, planting not just for my grandmother, but for a world that might need a little extra color in its palette. Now, with every blossoming pumpkin I come across, I think of that conversation often, reflecting on how simple intentions can manifest into something beyond our understanding. Sometimes, when I return to those familiar locations, I smile at what they have become. They still bloom with exaggerated vigor, and some, surprisingly, flourish in the most unlikely terrains. Occasionally, I still feel the weight of guilt tug me toward a memory I can't quite reach, but as my fingers touch the seed packets I carry, I remember that it is okay to let some things go, to plant them in the ever-stretching possibilities of the world. I stand at the edge of each new destination, ready to find better soil, knowing that every tiny legacy I craft can yield unexpected blooms in the hearts of others. Update: recently, while wandering through a farmer's market, I encountered a woman, laughing with her children as they gathered pumpkins from a cellar. I felt a strange connection and approached her. When she turned, her eyes sparkled with familiarity, making my heart race. It was her, the woman from that fateful evening. We talked, laughed together, sharing stories of growth, both of plants and family. I realized then that perhaps planting those seeds had led me to her, creating connections that transcended space and time, and reminding me that even in the darkness of doubt, new beginnings could sprout in the most unexpected ways. As we continued to talk, I felt warmth spreading through me, not just from the sun shining overhead, but from the joy of genuine connection. Her name was Clara, and she spoke with a gentle enthusiasm that reminded me of a soft breeze rustling through autumn leaves. She told me about her garden, how it had become a sanctuary for her and her children, a place where laughter intertwined with the scent of earth and flowers. Each tale she shared reminded me of the myriad of seeds I had scattered over the years, each a tiny anchor to different moments, emotions, and places. I felt a flicker of pride. Each pumpkin seed I had planted was my silent rebellion against the void, my way of nurturing life when my own felt so unmoored. We exchanged stories about our respective lives, my heart fluttering with the thrill of the unexpected, yet this familiar feeling lingering in the corners of my mind as if Clara and I had shared a memory long lost to time. The conversations danced effortlessly, filled with warmth, as if two old friends were catching up after a lifetime apart. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with strokes of orange and purple, I couldn't help but wonder if planting those pumpkin seeds had somehow returned this lost piece of my own story back to me. Time slipped away, and when the market began to wind down, I felt an inexplicable urge to share my secret, the secret that had shaped the past 2 decades of my life. Amidst the shuffle of people packing up their fruits and vegetables, I glanced down at the small tin I kept in my pocket. It was filled with pumpkin seeds, my little carriers of hope. Taking a deep breath, I confessed to Clara about my habit of planting these seeds everywhere I visited. To my surprise, she didn't recoil or laugh. Instead, she leaned in closer, her eyes lighting up with curiosity and understanding. "You're spreading life," she remarked softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "That's beautiful." Her acceptance melted away any lingering hesitation within me, and for a moment, I felt lighter than I had in years. We parted ways under the twilight sky, exchanging numbers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, born from the act of sowing seeds, was destined. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself looking forward to our conversations, each message a promise of laughter and connection. I shared with Clara some of the stories tied to the different places I had scattered my seeds, the old oak tree at the park where I spent hours pondering life, the abandoned lot where colors from wildflowers peeked through cracks, and the quiet beach where I had walked alone during storms of doubt. Clara listened intently, sharing her own tales, and together we discovered that with every seed, there was a story waiting to grow. One evening, as we were chatting, I mentioned how I once planted a pumpkin seed at a crossroads, a literal crossroads, when I felt lost in life. Clara paused, her expression turning thoughtful. "You know," she said, "it's funny. I used to feel so lost at that same crossroads, but I think I found myself again the day I chose to create my garden. It was then that I realized the true magic of the seeds I'd carried all these years. They were never just about planting pumpkins, they were about the connections they formed, the memories cultivated in the soil of my life, and the friendships nurtured despite the passage of time." That simple act of spreading seeds translated into hope, leading me to Clara, someone who saw the world through a lens of beauty and growth, just like I did. As our relationship blossomed into something more profound than I could have envisioned, I felt a twinge of guilt creep in. While I was overjoyed at the newfound bond, I couldn't help but worry about the weight of my secret. I feared that revealing the full extent of my obsessive planning might tarnish our connection. Yet, as clumsy as it was, I felt an inevitable pull towards honesty, towards laying bare the parts of me that had been shaped by both joy and sorrow. One evening, over a cup of tea that Clara had brewed with her children's help, I finally shared my fears, how my association with the seeds often blurred the lines between joy and grief for me. Clara listened, allowing my words to settle like dust in the soft light of her cozy kitchen, before gently assuring me that we all carry our own seeds of pain and hope. In the following months, I watched as our friendship flourished, evolving into something even more enriching than I had expected. Together, we decided to create a community garden, inviting others to share their stories and plant their seeds, be it real pumpkin seeds or the metaphorical seeds of hopes, dreams, and healing. As we tilled the soil together, laughter surrounding us like the aroma of fresh earth, I realized that those seeds I had carried in my pockets for over 2 decades had not only been about growing pumpkins but about cultivating a garden of connections and shared experiences, where life flourished in unexpected ways. The garden became a haven for the neighborhood, a place where toiling hands came together, nurturing their personal journeys while embracing the beauty of community. Now, years later, as I look around at the vibrant blooms and bustling laughter that echo in the garden, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. The seeds I planted in moments of loneliness had woven a tapestry of stories, friendships, and love, intertwining with Clara's life and so many others, reminding me that the smallest acts can have immeasurable impacts on our paths. The lesson I learned through all this is that sometimes, we must spill a few seeds into the unknown to watch as hope and connection take root, finding their way through even the darkest of soils. And just like those pumpkins, we often bloom in ways we never imagined possible. As I stood there in the vibrant glow of the farmer's market, surrounded by the warm aroma of baked goods and the laughter of children weaving through the stalls, I felt a soft breeze brush against my cheek, and for a moment, it was as if the universe was affirming the serendipitous nature of this encounter. Clara and I exchanged stories, her children, their laughter echoing alongside our words, brought life to our conversation. She told me about the pumpkin patch they had started in their backyard, a promised joy for her kids each autumn, how it mirrored her own hopes that had taken years to cultivate after her husband's passing. My heart ached with understanding. I spoke of my own journey, of the seeds I carried and planted through life's seasons, and as I recounted my 20-year ritual, Clara listened with an intensity that felt both comforting and intimate. It dawned on me that she too had known grief, yet here we were, sharing laughter and anticipation, bridging the divides of our histories as if fate had orchestrated this reunion. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden rays across the market, I noticed the pumpkin seeds nestled in my pocket, heavy with meaning. They had been a lifeline for me, a testament to hope during solitary nights spent wondering if I'd ever reclaim the joy I once knew. And now, standing here with Clara, it was apparent that through those seeds, I had inadvertently sown hope into others' lives too, reaching far beyond my own existence. The connection we shared felt like the intertwining roots of the very pumpkins her children gathered, binding us together in ways I was only beginning to understand. I could see her tenacious spirit reflected in the way she maneuvered through challenges, nurturing her kids while still embodying her own dreams, and it inspired a shift within me. Perhaps it wasn't merely about tending to the plants but nurturing the bonds we create with each act of kindness, each seed we scatter into the world. The afternoon faded into a soft twilight, the sky painted in delicate hues of lavender and gold, and I knew I didn't want this moment to end. So, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, I suggested we exchange numbers, confronting the idea of forming a friendship in real time, beyond the realm of chance encounters. Clara's smile bloomed brighter, lighting up her face with enthusiasm. "I'd love that," she said, a gleam in her eyes that mirrored my own beliefs about fate and connection. As we exchanged numbers, I marveled at how easily two people could find a common ground in shared heartache while also discovering the promise of companionship, like two seeds finding their place in the same garden. In the days that followed, our friendship grew in unexpected ways. Texts turned into calls, and those turned into coffee dates that flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter and stories of our pasts, binding us closer. I met her kids. They were full of life, each visit to their home unveiling the world through their eyes, imagination unfettered, playfulness reigning supreme. I became a part of their little pumpkin patch, helping them nurture the plants that mirrored not only the story of their growth but also the healing process we all embarked upon together, learning one another's rhythms as shared lives often do. The more I immersed myself in Clara and her children's world, the more I realized how, through the simple act of planting seeds, I'd inadvertently transformed my lonely journey into a tapestry of relationships that enriched my heart and soul. Each pumpkin we nurtured in the garden became a symbol of our collective resilience, echoes of our laughter rustling through the leaves, reminding us of the roots we were cultivating together. I couldn't help but feel that the garden had, in many ways, become an extension of my own personal renaissance, a blossoming of hope and connection. But amidst the joy, I couldn't silence the whispers of doubt that sometimes crept back in. Could this really be it? Could I have truly found a new beginning so soon? One evening, while helping Clara and her kids carve pumpkins for Halloween, I found myself lost in thought, the glittering candlelight casting playful shadows across our faces. Clara must have sensed my distraction because she gently nudged me, her eyes piercing through my fog of insecurities. "What's on your mind?" she asked, genuinely curious. And in that moment, I poured out the remnants of my fears, my vulnerabilities tumbling forth like unwieldy seeds spilling across the ground. With earnest compassion, she reassured me, "Sometimes, we need to trust that the seeds we plant will flourish in their own time. Just as we've sowed pumpkins together, so too have we begun to nurture something beautiful between us." It was a simple, beautiful truth that struck a chord deep within me, urging me to embrace the journey ahead without the weight of expectations. Reflecting back on my 2-decade-long ritual of planting pumpkin seeds everywhere, I realized it wasn't simply about hoping for a garden to grow. It was an embodiment of faith in the power of life's smallest gestures, nurturing connections and building toward a future I couldn't yet comprehend. From that point on, every time I planted a seed in our shared garden, I felt an invitation to lay down roots, not just for the pumpkins but for the relationship budding between us, one that offered a path from solitude into community. Our lives began to intertwine seamlessly, a rhythm of support and companionship that inspired both of us to flourish. Clara and I became each other's harvest, brightening the dull moments of life with laughter and understanding. I watched, day by day, as hope sprouted and took form, nurturing not only the pumpkins in the patch but also the brave new beginnings our lives had shared. And that realization felt as miraculous as witnessing the very first green shoots pushing through the dark, rich soil of our intertwined fates. In the end, I found peace in knowing that sometimes, even the most solitary journeys lead us to unexpected gardens of connection, where laughter and love bloom amidst the shadows. The seeds we scatter throughout our lives may sprout in ways we neither foresee nor understand at first, reminding us that every act of kindness and every moment of honesty bears the potential to transform us into something we can hardly imagine. And as I look around at the thriving pumpkins each harvest season, I am left with not just gratitude but an entire garden of friendships blossoming around me, roots intertwined in ways that span the heart's vast corners, one seed, one connection at a time. I never thought my childhood resentment would follow me like a shadow, but here I am, finger hovering over the post button, ready to confess something I've kept bottled up for far too long. Growing up, my older brother Ryan was the constant reminder of how fragile life could be. Born with cerebral palsy, he navigated the world in a wheelchair and required assistance with nearly everything. I'm not ashamed to admit that, as his younger sibling, I often felt overshadowed by his circumstances. At family gatherings, all the attention was on him, his struggles, his achievements, the courage he showed just by waking up every day. I remember sitting on the sidelines, feeling invisible, watching our parents dote on him. It wasn't that I hated him, exactly, it was more like a simmering envy mixed with a profound discomfort about his condition that I didn't know how to express. This imbalance strained our relationship, especially as teenagers, when Ryan became more aware of his differences. I wanted to be the brother he looked up to, but instead, I often rolled my eyes or snapped back when he would ask for help. There was one instance I remember vividly. Ryan wanted to go to a concert in the city. He was so excited, beaming with that familiar spark that I rarely saw. I could feel all the pressure mounting. I didn't want to be seen as his caregiver, his protector, just another part of his life that would make me feel smaller. So, in a moment of selfishness, I told him I couldn't go. The disappointment etched on his face left me with an ache, but I convinced myself it was easier this way. Fast forward to a few years later, the day I got the call that he had passed away suddenly due to complications from his condition. It turned my world upside down. In an instant, the past evaporated, the resentment I had harbored turned into a tide of guilt that crashed over me, pulling me under. I found myself paralyzed by regret for all the times I hadn't been there for him when it mattered the most. I replayed those harsh words in my head like a broken record, and it's like every joy from my life had dimmed in his absence. Friends and family rallied around me, offering condolences, but nothing soothed the roar of what-ifs echoing in my mind. I missed my chance to be his brother. Months passed, and as I navigated this grief, I started volunteering at a local center for disabled individuals. It felt like an act of penance, but it also opened my eyes to a world I had distanced myself from. I met so many incredible people with stories that mirrored Ryan's in some ways, and I slowly began to understand the beauty of vulnerability and strength coexisting. With each moment spent there, I felt a piece of my heart begin to mend. But what still haunted me was the anger I held towards myself. I carried a journal where I poured out my thoughts, my regrets, my moments of clarity. The act of writing became a conduit for healing I didn't know I needed, a way to say all the things I never got to say to Ryan. In one entry, I finally allowed myself to say it. I loved him. I missed him like a part of myself had been ripped away. I wished I could go back and change the past, but I also started to realize that perhaps he wouldn't want me to. Perhaps he would want me to live fully, to embrace the beauty of his memory instead of being trapped in guilt. As I sit here now, sharing this with whoever may read it, I've come to understand that sometimes our flaws and regrets shape who we become. It is a bittersweet ache, the acknowledgement of our humanity wrapped in love and loss. I can't undo what was done, and maybe that's okay. In the quiet moments, I find solace in thinking of Ryan, not as the brother I lost, but as the inspiration behind my growth, reminding me to cherish each day, to express love freely, and to reach out to those who need it most. Maybe one day, I'll pay this forward, transforming that shadow of regret into something brighter, something more profound. So here I am, hoping that others who feel the weight of unspoken words or unresolved feelings can find comfort in the fact that it's never too late to reach out, to forgive, even if that means forgiving yourself. Take it from someone who learned too late, love, in all its forms, is always worth it. As for the update, I recently went to a support group for siblings of people with disabilities, where I found the courage to share my story. And in doing so, I discovered that many others carry similar burdens of guilt and regret. Together, we're finding healing, slowly, but surely, and with each meeting, I feel more at peace with my past. Maybe Ryan's legacy is alive within us all, reminding us to love fiercely and without reservation. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue across the park where I had spent many afternoons with Ryan, my older brother. It was a place filled with echoes of laughter and fleeting moments that now felt bittersweet. As I watched the leaves fluttering gently in the breeze, I was reminded of the stories we shared, his dry humor mixed with the uncanny ability to see life through an entirely different lens because of his disability. It was a perspective I often struggled to appreciate when I was younger. I had resented how my teenage life revolved around the concerns of his care rather than my own budding independence. I had seen him as a burden, an impediment to my social life, instead of the unique person he truly was. This resentment had sparked a schism between us, one that grew wider with each passing year until Ryan's quiet acceptance of my disdain made him retreat into himself. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self that his wheelchair wasn't a shackle, but rather a different avenue of viewing the world, one colored with resilience and strength. I remember vividly the day he passed, the cold starkness of that winter morning, a stark contrast to the warmth of memories we shared. The hospital room felt suffocating. Filled with machines that buzzed quietly, marking the slow passage of time. I sat there, frozen, as a flood of emotions enveloped me like a heavy blanket. Guilt gnawed at me, biting through my bravado as I scrolled through old pictures on my phone. I dreaded looking at them, afraid of what I might find, scenes of a childhood that had become tainted by my bitterness. In those final moments, I watched Ryan's chest rise and fall with increasing effort, each breath a painful reminder of both his fragility and strength. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I held his hand and whispered apologies, but I knew he wouldn't hear them. I felt an ache deep within me, a longing for those missed chances at reconciliation that could never be reclaimed. At the support group, I listened as others shared their stories, each personal tale a thread in a tapestry woven with guilt, regret, and ultimately, a profound love that transcended hardship. In those meetings, I recognized a shared human experience, our collective pain transformed into a bridge that connected us. One gentleman spoke of a similarly fraught relationship with his sister, and the eerie parallel struck a chord in me. The atmosphere shifted, we were no longer bound by our grief but united in our desire to heal. Slowly, I began to breathe again, letting go of the burdens I had carried for so long. I found comfort in the idea that it was okay to be imperfect, to have made mistakes. Ryan's legacy lived on, not merely as a memory but as a catalyst for change in my heart and perhaps even in the hearts of those around me. Each week, I faced the mirror of my past, and instead of seeing a villain, I began to recognize a lost child yearning for understanding. I realized that my regret could shape me, not break me, guiding me towards a gentler interaction with others, particularly in accepting their differences. Life, I had come to acknowledge, is interwoven with those we love, and the threads can be frayed and frayed again, but they always hold potential for strength and beauty if we're willing to stitch them back. Leaving the support group one evening, I paused at the entrance of the park where Ryan and I often played. Under the sprawling oak tree where his laughter once danced with the wind, I felt an unexpected sense of comfort. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ryan," allowing the breeze to carry my words into the quiet night. With that, I felt weight lifting, not because I had excused my past, but because I was beginning to forgive myself. I marked that moment, a turning point in my journey of healing, knowing that even as I carry my brother's absence in my heart, I can cherish the love he gifted me. It wasn't about erasing the hurt but embracing it, learning from it. Perhaps, in his own way, he was still teaching me lessons on compassion and connection, and now, armed with awareness, I aspire to keep those lessons alive, allowing his spirit to guide me on this path of love and acceptance. With each passing week, as I attended those support group meetings, I felt more in tune with the threads of my life, a tapestry woven with the vibrant colors of grief, guilt, love, and hope. I could see the connections forming among the group, comprised of siblings who held similar burdens of regret and sorrow. The first time I shared my story publicly, I was trembling, my voice barely above a whisper as I spoke Ryan's name. The room was silent, marked by a vulnerability that seemed to hover in the air, and as I revealed my struggles, I could see the understanding reflected in the eyes of my fellow attendees. They, too, had carried the weight of resentment at times, feeling as though the world had placed them on an uneven playing field due to the circumstances of their siblings' disabilities. The empathy in that room was profound. It was a shared solace amid pain, a recognition that we often struggled to balance our own lives while supporting loved ones who required so much more. I found myself embraced not just by comforting words, but by the compassion of people who understood the longing for unspoken words between siblings, the pent-up frustration when love felt too expansive to contain, and the aching emptiness that arises when that love is lost. My healing journey began to manifest in other areas of my life as well. I became more present, embracing quiet moments with my parents, who were also grieving their own loss in a way I hadn't fully appreciated before. One evening, while sifting through old family photos, I discovered a treasure trove of moments I had forgotten, a snapshot of Ryan laughing in the sun, his face lit up with joy, surrounded by our family. That image stirred something within me. I resolved to honor his memory by deepening my connections with everyone I cherished, to embrace the whole spectrum of love Ryan had shown me. On rainy days, I would sit by the window, reminiscent of our childhood, where we would watch the world outside, chatting about the mundane and the extraordinary as we let the droplets blur the outside world. I miss those moments, the pure simplicity in which love existed without the complexities we adultified as we grew older. Those memories became my sanctuary, guiding me through my days, illuminating the parts of my character that had dimmed beneath a palette of guilt and resentment. As the support group sessions progressed, our conversations morphed into gatherings that felt more akin to family reunions. We laughed, cried, and shared recipes that were inspired by those we loved. One evening, after a particularly intense session where we spoke about our aspirations to be better siblings, we all decided to take a step further. We would host a community picnic in honor of each of our siblings, a chance to celebrate their personalities, their quirks, and the joy they brought into our lives. As we organized the event, it sparked something within me. I found myself navigating through my grief with a renewed intention. One that shone brightly for all who were willing to see. The day of the picnic was etched in gold, with a gentle breeze whispering through the park and the laughter of children drifting into the sky. Each family brought dishes that carried stories, mementos of lives lived fully despite challenges. I watched as we all shared anecdotes about our siblings, revealing layers of their existence that showcased the love that overshadowed the hardships. It turned out that Ryan's peculiar fascination with the stars and space was inherited. Others in the group shared similar fascinations. They spoke of their siblings with pride, recounting stories that illustrated resilience forged in concrete challenges. The picnic soon transformed from a gathering of remembrance to a celebration of life itself. When the sun dipped low, casting a golden hue across the park, I stood with a plate in hand, looking at the vivid display of community spirit before me. There was Ryan's favorite dish, a pasta salad my mother always made for him, adorned with fresh herbs from our garden. As I took a moment to breathe, a wave of appreciation washed over me. I realized that every bite echoed through time, a delicious reminder that in the face of heartache, connection thrives. I took that memory of Ryan, intertwined with every laugh shared and every story told that day, and tucked it gently into my heart, marking it as a chapter of my growth. Now, each morning I would wake to a sense of purpose. I carry the lessons of compassion he taught me, reaching forward with open arms to everyone I encounter. Though the guilt sometimes creeps in during quiet moments, I remind myself that healing is not linear. It's the beautiful chaos of learning how to love again fully, how to mend the heart even when it feels frayed by the threads of loss. I understand that the journey is ongoing, but I allow for its ebbs and flows, fully aware of the light Ryan ignited within me. With that glow, I walk forward, striving to share that brilliance with others, a testament to my brother's enduring spirit. I smile more often now, and though the nights may still carry a tinge of sadness, I hold on to the memory of love, ensuring that part of him will never fade as long as I remain open to the connections and love around me. I never thought a simple request could age me a decade overnight, but that's precisely what happened during that fated spring break trip last year. It was meant to be a promise of fun and relaxation, a chance to distance myself from the unrelenting grind of college life and the constant pressure to excel. I was just 21, teetering on the precarious edge of adulthood, enjoying the carefree days of dorm life with my closest friend, Alan. He was the type of guy who could make anyone laugh, his infectious energy always lighting up the room. Together, we decided to head to a beach house owned by his family, knowing full well that the rest of our friends would join in the chaos. The first few days were blissful, sun-kissed skin, laughter echoing against the waves, and late-night bonfires where we told stories that blurred the lines between truth and embellishment. Yet, things took a turn when one evening, while we were sprawled across the sand, Alan slipped me a drink, a potent mix of whatever liquor he'd scavenged from the others. He smirked, raised his glass, and with a teasing tone, asked, "What's the wildest thing you've ever done?" That question hung in the air like a thundercloud, nudging at my insecurities. I had spent years cultivating an image of responsibility, of being the sensible one, while Alan was the party starter. Tempted by the thrill of vulnerability in that moment, I regaled them with an old story from high school, about how I once dared to sneak into a neighbor's pool under the cover of darkness. Laughter erupted, encouraging me, pushing me to divulge more. But it wasn't long before Alan challenged me again, pushing the limits further. "You wouldn't jump off the pier, would you?" He grinned, and the eyes of our friends lit up with a mix of excitement and disbelief. The old me would have steered clear of such recklessness, but a strange blend of courage and foolishness swept over me, igniting a fierce desire to break free from my self-imposed shackles. With a nod, I found myself racing toward the edge of the dock, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I could hear my friends cheering behind me, urging me on, and before I knew it, I leapt into the crystalline depths below. The rush was exhilarating, a heady concoction of laughter, shouts, and splashes, momentarily washing away my worries. But as I resurfaced, gasping for air, joy transformed into horror as I glanced back toward the pier. Seconds later, I watched as Alan's expression changed from delight to shock. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone struggling against the cold waves. In an instant, I transformed from the reckless adventurer into a lifeguard, instinct guiding my actions as I propelled through the water to reach them. I could hear the panic in their shouts, muffled by the roar of the sea, but I reached the girl just in time. Her eyes were wide with fear as I wrapped my arm around her, kicking hard against the tide, but despite my efforts, we both struggled in the frigid waters. Eventually, I managed to pull her back up to the wooden dock, panting and shivering, but all I could think about was the tide of realizations crashing over me. I had not been the brave hero, I was just a scared kid from that moment on, preferring to cling to safety even more viciously than before. The girl, it turned out, was fine, just shaken. Her grateful smile was the sole light in the rising storm of my thoughts. But that night, my recklessness morphed into something darker, deeper, as I reflected on the fine line that separates youthful adventure from genuine danger. In the days that followed, the initial thrill of spring break was replaced with a creeping sense of responsibility that shadowed me relentlessly. I found myself analyzing every risk, every decision, questioning who I was beyond the facade of carefree college life. I used to see life as a series of leaps into excitement, but now, I felt the weight of consequences heavily upon my shoulders. My peers resumed their laughter and beach games like nothing happened, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that I'd lost a piece of myself that day. As the sun began to set on our final night at the beach, everyone gathered for one last bonfire as the flames flickered like my restless thoughts. I sat quietly, observing my friends' jubilant revelry from the periphery, acutely aware of the stark contrast between their joy and my rising anxiety. I couldn't help but think I had aged more than just a few years in that moment, a concept that kept reverberating through my mind like a haunting echo. I felt the invisible scars deepen, accepting that growing up meant grappling with heavier choices and bearing the weight of the world with every decision I made from then on. But that's when Alan nudged me, pulling me to join in the spontaneous late-night dance party that had broken out, lifting the weight of the world just barely off my shoulders. In that shared moment, as music flowed through the air, I began to realize that this perverse cycle of responsibility and recklessness could coexist. Yet, the laughter felt different, more bittersweet than before, tinged with the reminder of what could have been. Months later, I still ponder how that trip aged me in ways I hadn't anticipated but subtly come to accept that it was all part of my evolving story. I learned to embrace the lessons learned through moments of fear and joy alike, balancing life's risks with the warm glow of memories shared with friends. And while I may have accelerated into adulthood that spring, I also forged deeper connections, finally realizing that each moment, laden with meaning, is the true essence of growing up, one beautiful, terrifying leap at a time. And now, as I sit in my dimly lit room, reflecting on that chaotic trip, I know I'm not the same person I was before that pier. You always carry a piece of it with you, don't you? The wildness of youth combined with the wisdom gained from necessity. Teaching you to dance through life's invitations and the whispers of its dangers all the same. Update: just this past weekend, I found myself at a gathering, one of many new adventures that have formed since that exhilarating flash of recklessness. Alan was there, of course, making jokes and riling everyone up, and amid the merriment, he pulled me aside to reminisce. Remember that pier jump? You were the hero of the hour, he laughed lightly. I chuckled but replied, yeah, but it aged me too, you know? He looked thoughtful for a moment before grinning, maybe a year or two, but you've grown. You're stronger, he said, clasping my shoulder. And I realized then that he was right. Sometimes, the moments that seem to age us the quickest can be the very ones that define us for years to come. As we returned to the lively kitchen filled with the aroma of homemade pasta and the sound of laughter, I couldn't shake off that moment with Alan. It was strange how a simple conversation could unravel a deeper thread in the fabric of my life. I felt an echo of nostalgia buried beneath layers of worry and responsibility. I watched as my friends swirled around in their carefree dance of adulthood, the kind we often take for granted until time itself shows its teeth. The years were marching on, yet here we were, caught in a time bubble, the weight of our shared memories lightening the burdens of our separate lives. With every toast and cheer, my mind flickered back to my own personal strife, balancing the chaos of work and family, dreams deferred, and aspirations left half-spoken. What had once felt like vibrant ambitions now felt like aging echoes of my former self. I found solace in the comforting warmth of companionship, but there was a tinge of melancholy that hung around like an uninvited guest. As the night deepened, Alan gathered us for a game that was meant for bonding but, as I soon discovered, it unraveled deeper fissures. He proposed a round of truth or dare, a harmless nostalgia trip that began with giggles and light teasing. But as it circled around, the dares shifted from fun challenges to deeper revelations, pulling secrets and insecurities from the shadows. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when someone would push too far, and my stomach knotted at the thought of what might be unearthed. When it came my turn, I chose truth, and Alan, with that mischievous twinkle in his eye, asked, "What's something you've done that you wish you could take back?" I could feel the pulse of the room stutter in anticipation, my heart thundering against my ribcage. What came to mind wasn't one single action but an amalgamation of tiny moments: the sting of envy when a friend succeeded, the harsh words hurled during an argument with my partner, the silent nights that slipped by under the weight of unspoken feelings. Instead of sharing those, I found myself morphed by instinct into a version of me that swaddled vulnerability and masked it with humor. I'd take back that day I thought it would be funny to throw a cherry bomb in the school bathroom. I chuckled, the laughter hollow in my throat, and for a moment, shared laughter filled the gap where discomfort dwelled. But that laughter soon faded as the dares grew more daring, revealing true fears and regrets. It became clear that we all bore the marks of our experiences, some more than others. When it was Alan's turn again, he smirked and said, "Okay, dare me to sing a song." But something in the way he played with his drink gave it all away. The smile never quite reached his eyes. Perhaps in that moment, everyone realized, for all the laughter and bravado, we were suspended in the perils of adulthood that seemed to sap away the essence of carefree youth. As the reality of our fragile unmasking settled over us, I found myself more aware than ever of how quickly years can slip by and change us. The carefree evenings of our youth were now sprinkled with the stardust of nostalgia but marred by the gravity of regret and responsibility. Later that night, as I whispered goodnight to my friends and climbed into bed, I couldn't escape the haunting truth that came with the joy of reunion: nothing stays the same, and clinging to the past sometimes only amplifies the ache of becoming. I closed my eyes, listening to the distant echoes of laughter drifting from the party still happening down the hall, and contemplated how every trial we endured, every choice that stung, contributed to the elevation of our lives, whether we liked it or not. In the insistent quiet of the night, I understood that these seemingly aging moments, both burdens and blessings, were the very threads that stitched our stories together. I saw the glimmer of hope in change, in growth, as I came to the realization that defining those moments from the past would not just contour my existence but also establish the path for journeys yet to come. As I drifted into sleep, my mind wandered to the idea of seeking out each experience, embracing even the pain, like sculptors shaping their creations, understanding that just as love and laughter could nourish, fears and regrets could forge resilience. Life doesn't just age us, it crafts us, one unassuming night at a time. Update: a week later, after our reunion, I received a message from Alan, asking if we could meet up. Skeptical at first, I agreed, intrigued. We met at the park where we used to hang out as kids, and as we walked, he admitted that he had been struggling with his own demons, an unexpected job loss and feeling inadequate. I could see the toll it had taken on him, and somewhere within me, I realized that though life might age us, it could also connect us in newfound ways. Through that honest exchange, we made a pact to not only be there for each other but to face life's hurdles together, renewing our friendship after years of drifting apart. In that moment, it was clear, the journeys that once seemed daunting were now avenues for growth. Together we could battle the inevitability of aging, one small victory at a time. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream, the soft golden hue of the setting sun spilling through the trees as it cast playful shadows on the grass. I felt an unexpected surge of gratitude for this gathering. It was more than just a reunion, it had morphed into a ceremony of solace, a reminder that the scars life left behind weren't just signs of hardship but also badges of honor, stories that could bridge the distances created by time and circumstance. As we lounged around the fire pit, roasting marshmallows and sharing light-hearted banter, I couldn't help but take note of Alan's infectious laughter, a sound that still echoed in my mind long after it faded. It pulled me back to simpler days, times when our biggest concerns revolved around surreptitious adventures rather than mortgages or career trajectories. Amid the laughter, I glanced around the circle of friends, observing familiar faces now softened by time, laughter lines deepening yet exuding a warmth that suggested resilience and shared history. Later in the night, when the conversation turned slanted under the weight of intimacy and vulnerability, I felt compelled to share a deeper part of my own journey. I spoke of my struggles with anxiety that had unraveled quietly beneath the surface like a steadily rising tide. The reactions varied, some expressed understanding, while others listened intently, searching for an anchor within my words, a piece of their own experience reflected back. In that space, my age felt like a cloak that had momentarily slipped away, revealing the essence of who we've all become, an understanding that time might play tricks on our bodies, but it also created richness within our souls. When the gathering finally dispersed under a pale moon, I felt that renewal swell within me, a hope that my friendship with Alan and the others would not wane again. In the days that followed, our pact became an organic ritual, as natural as breathing. We met every week, sharing meals, laughter, and the weight of our experiences. Together, we navigated our anxieties, our losses, and the nagging fears that haunted us. Slowly, I began to witness the remarkable transformation in us all. Alan found clarity in his career path, and his laughter returned, more uninhibited. I noticed that sharing our struggles didn't age us prematurely but rather added depth to our friendship, enriching our interactions in ways we hadn't fathomed before. Weeks rolled into months, and as seasons shifted, I felt a strange kinship with the years that had passed. Each joyous gathering turned into a celebration of what it meant to grow, not just older but, more importantly, evolved as individuals tethered through shared understanding. It was an unexpected journey, where the very things that threatened to age us, our fears, losses, regrets, actually forged unbreakable bonds. We learned that life was not just about the passage of time but about the richness of shared experiences, laughter that lingered long after we parted ways, and the unseen scars that told our stories of survival. Reflecting on it all, I realized that with each passing year, I felt less inclined to fear aging. Instead, I embraced it, recognizing that the moments that truly age a person are not so much the events themselves but how those events shape our hearts, our connections, and our understanding of what it means to be alive. And while life continues to throw its curveballs, challenges that will inevitably come, there's comfort in the knowledge that we are in this together, each experience a thread stitching us closer to one another. Months later, at another gathering meant to mark a cathartic year, Alan raised his glass, eyes sparkling with a fierce joy. "Here's to moving forward, to aging together," he proclaimed, a toast that resonated deeply within me. And I lifted my glass, not just to the friendships we had rekindled or the trials we had faced but to the beautiful realization that aging is but another chapter of living authentically, with cherished companions beside us. In the warmth of that moment, I also felt a silent promise to myself, never to take for granted the people who grace my life with their authenticity, influencing me more profoundly than the relentless march of time ever could. So, here's to the inevitable changes that life presents, always met with open arms and willing hearts, redefining the very essence of what it means to truly grow. And perhaps that's the greatest victory of all. Aging is not a solitary endeavor but a collective undertaking, a journey worth embarking on together. It started with a mundane moment in our living room, me scrolling through my phone while my husband, Lucas, slumped into the couch, engrossed in a video game that he was utterly convinced was the best thing since sliced bread. The air buzzed with the sounds of gunfire and explosions while I obediently pretended to laugh at the banter with his online friends despite feeling an unsettling knot growing in my stomach. We'd been married for 3 years, and while I cherished our relationship, I constantly battled with the memories of what I had left behind when I'd moved to this small town to build a life with him. The friends I had slowly slipped away, and as a result, my social calendar had dwindled to much less than I would have hoped for. So, when I received the invitation that I knew he would despise, an opportunity bloomed inside me like a flower in the desolate landscape of our evenings. It was from my college friend, Mia, who had just moved back to town and was hosting a small get-together for everyone. Mia thrived in social settings, drawing people in like moths to a flame, while Lucas preferred his solitude, avoiding social interactions like a bear dodging the hunter. I wrestled with the ethical side of my decision all day, but each time I imagined how much I missed seeing familiar faces and sharing laughter, I put down the guilt and picked up the thrill of acceptance. I typed a quick response to Mia, accepting the invitation for both of us before I could think it through entirely. The day of the gathering arrived, and the very moment I mentioned it to Lucas, expecting a mild protest at worst, I was met with incredulity. His face morphed from confusion to disbelief, and he wordlessly stared at me as though I had grown a second head. "You invited me to a party? I don't want to go," he said flatly, his voice steady but the tension unmistakable. I felt the heat of his disappointment. Still, I couldn't bring myself to apologize for something that, in my mind, was necessary. "It'll be fun," was all I managed to say, hoping to sound convincing. His muted reply stung, but I reasoned if he could join in the effort, maybe he would learn to enjoy it, and we could reconnect with some of the people who made my past feel vibrant. But as the evening approached and the prospect of the gathering loomed, I could sense his resistance tightening like a noose around my chest. As we drove to Mia's place, the silence between us felt oppressive. Lucas gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles almost white against the leather, while I attempted conversation after conversation, each met with curt replies or muttered affirmations that fell flat. Reaching Mia's house unleashed an abundance of laughter and warmth, an intoxicating air that enveloped me the moment I stepped inside, but it was clear Lucas felt anything but welcoming. I introduced him to everyone, jubilantly urging him to loosen up, to mingle, but the feeling of his reluctance followed us like a shadow. Moments turned into an unrelenting ebb of discomfort as I found joy in reconnecting with old friends while he lingered at the edges, the distant figure who carried an invisible wall. I pulled away to check on him periodically, but his responses became fewer, shorter, almost strained. By the time the clock struck mid-evening, the festive mood turned sour under the weight of an unspoken animosity. Lucas had remained isolated, the distance muting the laughter and the cocktails swirling around me. My heart sank each time I caught a glimpse of his expression, somewhere between hurt and annoyance, and in that moment, I realized I had prioritized my desire for connection over his comfort. The party blurred into the background, and my resolve to stay strong began to quiver. Finally, as Mia initiated a group game that required partners, I looked at Lucas, who did his best to smile through clenched teeth but didn't move an inch. As the laughter erupted around me, I missed the sparkle of life in his eyes, and guilt washed over me as I felt trapped by my own choices. I wished desperately to turn back time, to have that moment at home again where I could have refused Mia's invitation from the start, protecting both my husband and myself from this brewing discord. With a heavy heart, I made my way back to Lucas, the laughter drowning in the realization that I could pull him back, but devoid of the spark that had brought me here. He was slipping away. "Can we leave?" he asked quietly, and my heart twisted painfully as relief finally washed over me. "Of course," I replied, the tension easing as I felt a mutual understanding wrap around us like a thin, tawdry blanket. We slid out of the warm embrace of the house, leaving behind echoes of laughter and familiar faces, heading home where I vowed to make amends. In the following days, the silence was laden with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Eventually, we found ourselves in that same living room again, this time under a calm atmosphere, the sun setting peacefully outside as we sat down together, his eyes meeting mine. I laid it bare, the guilt and the desire for understanding. To my surprise, Lucas shared his feelings too, expressing that my actions, while not malicious, had cast him aside in a moment critical to my rediscovery. It was an eye-opener for both of us, becoming a defining moment where we learned the importance of communication and the necessity of being both partners and friends. In hindsight, I understood I must never take liberties on his behalf again, and he recognized that while solace could be sought in our shared moments, it wouldn't always be his preferred silence. As I reflect on our story, I can't shake the feeling that we grew stronger that day. The tension that once lingered became a stepping stone for a deeper understanding. We laughed at the irony that tied our lives, realizing we were indeed partners in a balancing act of friendship against the backdrop of love. I share this now in hopes of letting others see the importance of clarity and connection in relationships, learning to stand side by side instead of drifting apart into uncertainty. And just when I thought it was the end, Mia started planning a redemption gathering, this time with the option to bring a partner. Consider our invitation for both of us a rather thoughtful approach that respects boundaries while still allowing for growth and connection. Ah, the irony and beauty of relationships. Perhaps the silver lining was that out of miscommunication, we discovered a deepened bond. As I gazed at the invitation clutched between my fingers, a soft breeze wafted through the open window, carrying with it the scent of early spring flowers blooming outside. It felt strange, looking over the neatly penned names and the proposed date that loomed on the horizon. The redemption gathering, as Mia had labeled it, presented a fresh opportunity that was both exciting and nerve-wracking. Reflecting on the past months following that heated argument with my husband, Alex, I found myself in a space that was surprisingly contemplative. The first gathering had been a disaster, awkward silences, forced laughter, and the sense that I had dragged Alex into something he genuinely disliked. The more I thought about it, the more guilt weighed heavily on my heart. Yet, that challenging experience seemed to have nudged us in the right direction. We had talked more openly since then, sharing our thoughts on expectations, personal boundaries, and what we truly wanted from our relationships, both with each other and with others. Still, The prospect of attending this new gathering brought back a flicker of anxiety. What if things went sideways again? What if Alex withdrew into himself, refusing to engage? The mere thought made me slightly nauseous, but I also had found that these moments of discomfort often led to the most profound growth. That evening, as the sky transitioned to a soothing shade of deep blue, I mustered the courage to broach the subject with him. Sitting across from Alex at our small kitchen table, I watched the light from the overhead fixture cast gentle shadows on his face. His brow furrowed as I laid out the details. "Can we talk about Mia's gathering?" I started, my voice steady but my heart racing. "She's decided to have a second one, and this time, it's open to partners." Alex lifted his gaze from the fork he was idly spinning. I could see the flicker of interest behind his eyes, though a shadow of tension clung to the corners of his mouth. "Are you serious? You think we should go?" I thought. I paused, uncertain how to phrase my thoughts without triggering any defensiveness. I thought it could be a chance to try again, to connect with people outside our usual circle. We wouldn't have to force anything, we could just see how it goes. He leaned back in his chair, a mix of contemplation and reluctance etching his features. "You remember how the last one went, don't you?" I felt so out of place. The music was too loud, and the conversations felt superficial. "I do," I said softly, reaching across the table to take his hand. "But we've had some time since then. I think we've both grown a bit. Plus, maybe we could come up with a plan together to make it more enjoyable for you. You can be involved with the choices this time." His gaze softened at my words, and for a moment, I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "All right," he finally replied, the corners of his mouth curling into a faint smile. "But only if I get to pick some activities. No more impromptu let's play this game situations." "Deal," I said, relief flooding through me as I squeezed his hand. We spent the next hour discussing how we could approach the evening. We mapped out an escape plan, should he begin to feel overwhelmed, and even decided on what appetizer we might bring, something simple yet comforting. The more we planned, the lighter the tension in the air became. I realized how transcendent it could be to share such moments of vulnerability. The day of the gathering arrived, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of orange and violet, I felt an unexpected thrill run through me. The gathering itself unfolded more smoothly than I could have imagined. While there were moments when Alex would excuse himself to drink water or step outside for a breath of fresh air, he surprised me by interspersing these breaks with laughter and engaging conversations. It was as if he had stepped into an entirely new persona, comfortable yet refreshingly authentic. After the flow of conversation and refreshments waned, Mia decided to initiate an impromptu game. I could feel Alex tense momentarily, but instead of retreating back into his shell, he whispered to me, "Let's make it our own." And we did just that, molding the game to fit our comfort level. Laughter echoed around the room, and rather than feeling like spectators, Alex and I became participants crafting our moments together. At the end of the night, as we drove home, I glanced over at him, captivated by the peaceful expression on his face. "I'm glad we went," he said softly. "I didn't expect to have that much fun." As we settled into the quiet of our shared space, the tension that had once festered in the corners of our relationship began to dissolve. In those moments, I realized that vulnerability isn't just about sharing our fears and insecurities, it's about stepping forward into the unknown together, hand in hand. As the days passed, the memories of the gathering lingered, like a gentle reminder against the backdrop of our life together. Alex and I continued to communicate more, feeling our way through shared experiences, carving out areas where we could meet in the middle. The bond we forged grew deeper with each conversation, every shared smile, and even the silences no longer felt heavy, but rather embraced the soothing rhythm of companionship. And while I still sometimes replayed the moments of uncertainty in my mind, the invitations I accepted on his behalf, the guilt I had struggled with, it became evident that those choices, fraught with anxiety at the time, were stepping stones leading us into a future enriched by connection and understanding. With that in mind, I wrote a quick update to this story, unsure of how many might resonate with our experience but hopeful that it might provide a glimmer of peace for others. It might seem trivial, the little triumphs we achieve through discomfort, but in the grand tapestry of love and relationships, those moments are what fill the edges with color. In the end, it wasn't simply about whether or not I was the asshole for inviting Alex without his consent. It was a journey reflecting the beautiful complexity of partnership, each misstep becoming an opportunity for growth, each reluctance morphing into newfound strength. Together, we explored the intricate dance of acceptance and trust, our love flourishing amid the chaos. Sometimes, That's exactly what a relationship needs: a little risk, a little vulnerability, and a whole lot of love. As Mia's redemption gathering drew closer, my heart danced with anticipation, caught somewhere between excitement and nerves. I found myself daydreaming about what this gathering would entail: a cozy evening filled with laughter, warmth, and the reassuring hum of conversations weaving through the air like an old, familiar song. It was a promise of new beginnings, a chance to mend what had frayed and bring Alex and me closer to not only Mia but to the people who may have misinterpreted our earlier miscommunication. In the weeks leading up to the event, Alex and I delved into the depths of our partnership, discussing our feelings and expectations, both on a personal level and regarding our relationships with others. I was struck by the realization that communication, though often challenging, was a powerful tool we could wield together. We shared late nights filled with whispered confessions, laughter echoing into the dark, and moments of shared silence that spoke volumes more than words ever could. It wasn't easy, but as we navigated this terrain, I felt an unwavering sense of connection growing, blossoming amidst our conversations. The night of the gathering arrived with a crispness in the air, a soft embrace of autumn welcoming us at Mia's doorstep. She had transformed her living room into a comforting haven, with soft string lights casting a warm glow over the assembled group. Instantly, the atmosphere felt alive, buzzing with shared energy and the promise of heartfelt interaction. I looked at Alex, who stood beside me, his expression a careful blend of curiosity and cautious optimism. As we walked through the door together, I felt the weighted ties of my earlier mistake lifting, replaced by the buoyant possibilities of a shared experience. Mia greeted us with open arms, her smile a bright beacon amid the gathering crowd. The moment we stepped into that room, I realized how surrounded we were by friends who genuinely cared about our happiness, people who understood the complexity of relationships and were there not to judge but to embrace the beautifully messy journey we all traveled. As introductions floated around the room, I noticed Alex relaxing, allowing himself to be drawn into conversations, laughter bubbling forth as we mingled with others who had experienced feelings of alienation fully. We shared stories about misunderstandings and unexpected turnarounds, forming connections between kindred spirits navigating similar paths. The more I watched him engage with others, the more my heart swelled with love and appreciation for how far we had come. It was in this environment of acceptance that we began to open up further to one another, Alex sharing his initial apprehensions about the gathering, revealing how caught off guard he had felt when I accepted the invitation without discussing it with him first. The honesty in his voice was disarming, but I also recognized a hint of admiration, a testament to the connection we were fostering. Later in the evening, Mia gathered everyone around for a moment of reflection, inviting us to share something meaningful we'd learned about ourselves in recent times. As we went around the circle, I noticed the vulnerability threading through our words, with each story of miscommunication and growth echoing the themes of understanding and acceptance. When it was my turn, I spoke of the lesson I learned through this experience, emphasizing the importance of consent and the value of surprises wrapped in consideration. I could see Alex's eyes widening slightly in surprise, and at that moment, it struck me, together, we had crafted something beautiful from the raw edges of our previous missteps. As the night wore on, a gentle mix of nostalgia and hope enveloped me, and I felt an overwhelming gratitude for the way life unfurled itself before us like a tapestry continuously being woven. I realized that relationships are not dictated by the occasional blunders but are reinforced by our willingness to learn and grow through each encounter. Perhaps, in the grand scheme of love and partnerships, our moments of uncertainty were just stepping stones leading us toward greater intimacy and understanding. Later that night, we found ourselves heading home, the streets illuminated by the soft glow of street lamps. The silence between us felt comfortable. It was filled with understanding, shared smiles, and the occasional laugh as we recounted comical exchanges from the gathering. The past few weeks resonated within me as I took Alex's hand, understanding that our connection had woven a safety net beneath us, cushioning us from the chaos of life's little storms. The curious beauty of relationships was revealed, a mosaic crafted not merely from harmonious moments but from painful lessons, fractured expectations, laughter, and love, that weave into something extraordinary when nurtured tenderly over time. And as we settled into our evening routine, I felt lighter, the shadows of doubt fading far into the background. I realized that I wouldn't change a thing about our experience, miscommunication included. It simply added depth to our journey, breathing life into our bond. I knew then that we'd constantly be evolving, finding new ways to express our love and support for one another, always navigating together, ever so intricately, through the beautiful tapestry of our lives. The air hummed with the promise of tomorrow, and as I turned to sleep, I felt an exciting tranquility flow through me, offering ripe possibilities like a still river waiting to be explored. Confession, I gave head to a freaking banana. Yes, you read that right, and before you jump to conclusions about my sanity, let me explain. I'm just an average 20-something living in a small town, working at a local grocery store, and spiraling into a mild existential crisis as I try to figure out life and relationships. I've always had a quirky sense of humor, but my friends would often joke that my romantic life was just as ripe for comedy as it was for disaster. My last relationship had ended in a particularly awkward way. He had decided he needed space, only to backtrack and unceremoniously announce he was now dating someone who he claimed was better suited for him. I didn't have the heart to tell him that meant the end of my nights spent watching terrible reality TV and my weekends filled with the silence of loneliness. So, in my state of mild despair, I decided to throw a little party for myself. I bought a few bottles of wine, some snacks, and yes, a bunch of bananas. I sat on the couch, watching my favorite movies while indulging in a few glasses. As the evening wore on, the combination of a couple of glasses of wine and my ever-present bad sense of humor led to an unusual thought. Wouldn't it be funny to recreate a famous scene from a movie using just a banana? There I was, giggling to myself, holding the banana in one hand, and promptly made a comment about giving head to the banana, laughing hysterically at my own lack of dignity. My mind was buzzing with the absurdity of it all, but as I leaned in to take a ridiculously dramatic bite, inspiration struck. What if I turned it into a performance? It felt ridiculous but sort of liberating. Why not poke fun at my love life and the angst that seemed to follow me like a bad smell? I set my phone on a nearby shelf, hit record, and proceeded to give the banana a show. I don't know what possessed me, perhaps it was the wine or the need to embrace the absurdity of life, but I made a point to give that banana a moment to shine. I twirled and laughed, exaggerating every move until I lost myself in the charade, winking at the camera and pretending the banana was the sweetest lover I'd ever had. So there I was, full of self-derision and ridiculousness, recording myself in what I now refer to as the banana incident. A few friends got a hold of the video, and to my astonishment, it turned into a mini-viral sensation among a tight-knit group of social media friends. What had started as a moment of deep sadness turned into something quite remarkable. It pulled me back from the brink of feeling sorry for myself and showed me that laughter, even at my own expense, was a gift I'd forgotten I possessed. Weeks went by, and I began to embrace my sense of humor in ways I never thought possible, sharing my journey through life and heartbreak in an unapologetic light. I connected with new people online, all drawn to my newfound candor and kooky content. Perhaps life didn't need to be so serious. Just when I thought I was done with the banana saga, I got an unexpected message. It was from an old college friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His messages were lighthearted and full of laughter, recalling the outrageous things we did back in our carefree days. It led to a few exchanges back and forth, and the connection felt different, deeper somehow. We agreed to meet up, and to my surprise, I found myself excited, because he had seen the infamous banana video and thought it was the most hilarious thing he'd ever witnessed. When we met, it was awkward but charming in a way that felt warm. We talked, we laughed, and as the evening wore on, I realized that this was the first time I truly felt connected to someone since that terrible breakup. So, you see, giving head to a banana wasn't just a ridiculous act of drunken escapism, it was a turning point that led me to rediscover laughter, rekindle friendships, and embrace the beauty of the absurd in life. Sometimes, you have to let go of everything, even your dignity, to find joy and connection. In retrospect, my confession isn't about the banana, it's about how taking a moment to explore the ridiculousness we often shy away from can lead us down enchanting, unexpected paths. Update: a month later, that college friend and I decided to take things to the next level. We're officially dating. And yes, we've shared a few more crazy moments that involve fruits and laughter, which have solidified our bond even more. Life can be so wonderfully absurd, and honestly, I can't wait to see where this new adventure takes us, knowing that sometimes the most ridiculous confessions can lead to the greatest joys. As I sit down to reflect on the whirlwind of my life since that fateful day, a gentle smile creeps across my face, and I can't help but laugh at how surreal it all feels.
The very idea that I, a fairly normal 20-something struggling to find myself in the vibrant chaos of college campus life, could end up dating one of the most adventurous spirits I know is, frankly, absurd.
My experiences had primed me for a strict adherence to what was sensible, but somehow, when laughter collided with randomness, it unlocked parts of me I hadn't even realized were closed off. Let's not forget the banana, though. In mere moments of silliness, It became an emblem of spontaneity and fun, something to be looked back on fondly rather than with embarrassment. Our mutual unorthodoxy sparked an unspoken camaraderie between us, something blossoming into laughter-filled nights where we'd recount our craziest experiences over shared ice cream sundaes, rich chocolate drizzling down the sides, rivaled only by the heaps of fruity toppings we continually consumed in jest of that first encounter. Conversations flowed easily, we shared secrets intertwined with memories, and each time he'd wink at me over the table, I felt a warmth I'd once thought reserved for fairy tales. It was during one of those late-night talks, surrounded by cushions and lingering energy from a vibrant party we'd just left, that I discovered we were both fascinated by the absurd elements of life, the little quirks we found that reminded us not to take things too seriously. He confessed that day how he recently wrestled with the idea of joining a juggling club, not because he particularly wanted to juggle, but rather because it seemed hilariously awkward and a little outlandish. We burrowed deeper into our joyfully whimsical thoughts, and who knew a casual conversation could emit so much warmth and connection. As the month neatly slipped away into a golden series of dates, I found myself growing more and more attached, not just to him but to the laughter and adventure we created together, filling up my once monotonous life with dazzling episodes of spontaneity. One particular afternoon, in an impulsive fit of creativity, I suggested we should enter a local fruit sculpture competition that promoted sustainability in art. The idea met with guffaws, and he played along. We both knew it would involve making something wild and bizarre, definitely fruit-inspired. Days later, we stood in my tiny kitchen, hands sticky with juice and laughter erupting between all the gut-busting negotiations of who would carve the watermelon into a shark and who would get the pineapple crown. We envisioned an outrageous creation that would not only make the judges scratch their heads in disbelief but also bring smiles to the faces of anyone observing our ridiculous efforts. As we cut, sculpted, and assembled our fruity tribute, I realized we weren't just creating a quirky piece, we were crafting our own little sanctuary, one laugh and mishap at a time, stamped with the ridiculousness of our adventures. The day of the competition arrived in a flurry of excitement, where we displayed our overly ambitious pineapple shark hybrid that looked more like a creature out of a cartoon than anything serious. We embraced the absurdity wholeheartedly, encouraging the giggles and whispers from passers-by instead of sympathizing with our failed artistic endeavor. The joy we felt, sharing inside jokes about our outlandish expectations, made the whole experience so rich it didn't matter that we didn't win. The connection we forged amidst the chaos and creativity became its own victory lap, one I relished deeply. Looking back on this past month, I realize what really matters isn't the moments that conform to a certain ideal but rather those that push boundaries, bend the rules, and open up new ways to see our lives unfold. Whether it's giving a silly oral salute to a banana or creating the world's most ludicrous fruit sculpture, these occurrences remind us that joy blooms in the strangest of places. This relationship, which started with a whimsical confession, has encouraged me to fully embrace the absurdities and find companionship in shared laughter, transforming my once rigid view of life into a more colorful canvas ripe with joy and adventure. And as I embarked on this journey, I realized my heart isn't just bound to the fun we've shared but also to the genuine connection forming seamlessly as we continue to explore the ridiculousness that life hands us. With each step, I can't wait to discover what new crazy moment awaits us next and how these unplanned adventures will author the next chapters of our delightfully absurd story. As the weeks rolled into a month of uncharted romance, the absurdities we chased together began to shape my world in ways I had never anticipated. Our lives became a confusing yet wonderfully vibrant tapestry woven with silly moments and heartfelt confessions. We set a peculiar rhythm to our relationship, one that was fueled by spontaneity and an appreciation for the ridiculous. Our first official date was at a quaint little fruit market that sprawled just outside the city, a hidden gem we stumbled upon while searching for fresh ingredients for an impromptu picnic. As we ambled through aisles brimming with colorful produce, I found solace in our shared jokes and the way we could burst into laughter over the oddly shaped vegetables that protruded from their boxes like playful imposters. I watched her pick up a rogue-looking radish and, with a mischievous grin, announce that it resembled a mythical creature, its earthy tones giving way to vivid storytelling. It felt surreal to be with someone who embraced these fleeting absurdities as if they were sacred, as if the bizarre moments held secrets that could weave our hearts closer together. One sunny afternoon, as we tucked ourselves into a grassy nook beneath sprawling cherry blossoms, we decided to bring our own twist to the typical picnic fare. Inspired by the playful essence of our relationship, we rummaged through our gathering of fruits, bananas, kiwi, and stubbornly ripe peaches, and came up with a silly competition. Each of us would create the most absurd fruit art we could imagine, an homage to our own quirks. I crafted a banana in the shape of a guitar, complete with toothpick strings, while she managed to create a hastily constructed fruit face that made us both chuckle uncontrollably. These moments became not just laughter shared but also silent acknowledgments of the warmth blossoming between us. While we savored the summer sun, I felt my heart flutter as we gazed at one another, the playful energy uniting us in a way that felt pure and right. But life, in its beautifully chaotic nature, also had its shadows. With the excitement, I wrestled with a gnawing fear. Was this delightful absurdity merely a phase? I had seen relationships begin with laughter only to sour when mundane realities encroached. To confront these insecurities, one night I invited her over for a cozy movie marathon. As we nestled beneath blankets, our favorite snacks laid out before us, I decided to confess that I felt a flicker of worry, that our spontaneous moments could lose their charm. Instead of recoiling from my honesty, she turned to me and smiled, her eyes gleaming with understanding. Life will have its share of mundane moments, she said, her voice soothing like a gentle breeze. But as long as we keep finding joy in the ridiculous, we'll be all right. In that moment, her reassurance calmed the storm within me. This relationship, with its quirks and spontaneous laughter, inked itself deeper into my heart, no longer merely a whimsical adventure but a genuine companionship I yearned to nurture. As the season changed, so did the fabric of our relationship. We began to integrate our silliness into everyday life. Once mundane errands became bursts of comedy as we playfully reenacted scenes from our favorite films in the aisles of the grocery store or turned waiting in lines into silly competitions of who could make the best fruit-themed puns. With each shared absurdity, the bond we formed became a buoy against the currents of normalcy. Then one evening, beneath a sky spattered with stars, we found ourselves at that same cherry blossom tree, the spot where so many of our inside jokes had been born. I looked into her eyes, their warmth reflecting the moonlight in a dance. It was the perfect moment, and both a little silly and profound. Suddenly, I pulled out a small package I had hidden in my bag. I know this sounds ridiculous, I began, feeling a warrior's heart flutter in my chest, but I wanted to ask you. She eagerly leaned closer, the anticipation etched across her face. As I unveiled a small, surreal bouquet of fruit-shaped magnets, I stammered through the laughter, if you'd be my partner in this absurd adventure for life. Her laughter filled the air as she nodded, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. Yes. Absolutely, she exclaimed, and in that moment, we recognized that our hearts were no longer tucked away in fearful silence but were joyfully charting an exhilarating course toward the unexpected. In the days that followed, we embraced the delightful whimsy our relationship had forged. I realized that opening myself to the ridiculous had transformed my life, urging me to cherish not only the laughter but the deep, meaningful moments shared with someone who understood the beauty of life's absurdity. As we nestled into our future together, I knew this confession wasn't just about fruit or moments of laughter, it was a celebration of the incredible joy found in embracing life as it came, each day a fresh adventure painted with the hues of love, laughter, and the delightful unknown. I remember the morning of my first job interview as if it were yesterday, a mix of excitement and dread swirling inside me like a storm waiting to break. Fresh out of college, I was desperate for my first big break, the kind of opportunity that would finally let me escape the confines of my parents' house, where the walls seemed to echo with expectations and every conversation felt more like an interrogation. I had settled into the interview office, a room perfumed with the faint scent of peppermint and polished wood, the kind of place where dreams were supposed to begin but often fizzled into disappointments. My interviewer, a middle-aged man named Mr. Henley, had a warm smile that immediately put me at ease, or at least as at ease as one could feel when the weight of one's future hung in the balance. As he flipped through my resume, he made small talk, commenting on my university experiences, and I felt a strange sense of connection. We laughed over shared memories of late-night studying and caffeine overloads. Yet, as the questions turned serious, I began to feel the undertow of tension, as if our pleasant exchange was concealing a rapidly rising tide. The questions grew increasingly rigorous, probing into my past experiences, and that's when I noticed it, the subtle red flags that flickered in the depths of his expressions. A tightness around his eyes when I mentioned my volunteer work, a barely noticeable sigh when I talked about my time in group projects. I brushed it off at first, thinking I was simply reading too much into things. After all, this was just an interview, right? But as I articulated my vision for the future and the contributions I believed I could make to his organization, I caught a flicker of disappointment cross his face, as though I had disappointed him before I even began. The day soon morphed into an unexpected display of emotional vulnerability as I detailed my volunteer experiences, explaining how they shaped my views on teamwork and leadership. Mr. Henley nodded along, but there was a waning enthusiasm in his body language, an almost imperceptible retreat that made my heart sink. Somewhere inside, I suddenly felt the urge to justify myself, to explain why my life was a patchwork of different ventures rather than the linear path he seemed to be hoping for. The interview dragged on, each question exposing the gulf between what I thought he wanted to hear and what I needed to say. I could sense the distance growing with each passing moment, and as I exited the office, I wondered if I had left a piece of myself behind, if perhaps I had seemed too disorganized in a world that revered neat, clean lines. Days passed, each waking moment overshadowed by a gnawing doubt about my future, until finally, I received the email I had both dreaded and anticipated. "Thank you for your application," it started, and my heart sank further as words like regret and fit screamed at me from the screen. I spent that evening wallowing in self-pity, questioning my approach and feeling the weight of my perceived failures, replaying the interview in my mind over and over again. But there, amidst the waves of despair, a simple realization began to surface. I had been so preoccupied with their expectations that I had lost sight of my own identity. Slowly, I started crafting my narrative in my head, embracing the idea that my journey didn't have to mirror others' journeys to be valid or worthwhile. It was a winding path, a landscape of lessons learned, which would ultimately prepare me for opportunities that truly resonated with my spirit. I began applying for more positions, shifting my focus onto companies whose values aligned with my own. The healing was gradual but vital. I delved into further volunteering, enhancing my skill set, and forming connections that felt genuine. The process felt less like a chore and more like a journey, with growth nestled in every bump along the road. Finally, after weeks of uncertainty and with a renewed sense of purpose, I received a call from another firm, a startup with a mission that spoke directly to me. I didn't just want to rush into this new opportunity. For the first time, I felt equipped to be myself, to genuinely convey my experiences and beliefs. This time, when I stepped into the interview, the air felt different, and rather than presenting a facade, it was just me and my authentic journey. The room radiated warmth, and while the questions were still probing, I was met with shared smiles and nods of understanding. As I walked out, I felt a calm triumph wash over me, knowing that I had given my story wings. It was about much more than the job, it was a sincere expression of who I was, and I realized that discovering the right fit was about more than avoiding red flags, it was about embracing the search for places where my passions could thrive. Update: it's been a couple of months since I started my new job, and I can't express how right it feels. I've learned that the most significant red flags aren't just in the interviewers but often lie in the disconnect between who we think we should be and who we truly are. I've also developed a friendship with Mr. Henley, who reached out to offer me an unexpected opportunity to collaborate on a community project. Sometimes, paths cross in unexpected ways, and I've come to appreciate the beauty of my winding journey, ready for whatever lies ahead. As I sat in my cozy living room, the soft light of the setting sun casting golden hues across the walls, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come since that pivotal day. The little project Mr. Henley proposed had started as a simple idea, a community mural to bring the neighborhood together, but it blossomed into something far more meaningful. We gathered a lively group of people, each with their unique stories and talents, and before I knew it, the vibrant colors we splashed onto the canvas didn't just represent our individual identities but wove together a tapestry that reflected the spirit of our community. Each stroke of paint was a conversation, a connection, a laugh shared over pizza and cans of soda, with old men telling stories of yesteryear as young children splattered paint with joyful abandon. Those evenings became my sanctuary, a place to recharge away from the stresses of work, and I found myself forming relationships that felt genuine and enduring. As the weeks passed, I noticed Mr. Henley becoming a great friend, offering support and guidance, but also a touch of mystery. He had an ease about him and an otherworldly way of navigating challenges that left me in awe, yet sometimes I caught glimpses of a deeper layer within him, like shadows lingering just beneath the bright surface. One Friday evening, as we took a break to admire the burgeoning mural, I mustered the courage to ask him about himself. The way he paused, looking off into the distance as if weighing his words, left me both intrigued and anxious. Eventually, he shared snippets of his life, starting with his earlier days as a graphic designer to his decision to forsake the corporate grind for passion projects. In the midst of his tale, there was a mention of overcoming personal demons, a fleeting reference that seemed to deepen the shadows in his eyes. Over time, an unspoken bond formed between us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't revealing everything. Perhaps it was my experience from the past, where I'd seen the divide between what people presented and the truths they often hid, but the subtle red flags flickered like weak lights in the back of my mind. There was a day, certain in my conviction, when I stitched together my courage and invited him to share more. He regarded me with a smirk, the kind that held 1,000 secrets, and eventually began to talk about the time he spent in a creative retreat that pieced his life together after an emotional collapse. Part of him had always felt out of place, a wanderer searching for a purpose, yearning for acceptance. But as he allowed me a glimpse into his past, I began to sense weight behind those words, a history not just of passion but of scars that still would flare up uninvited. That night, under a velvety sky spattered with stars, I felt a strange sense of kinship with Mr. Henley. We were both navigating these paths toward healing and authenticity, albeit in different ways. Yet, I couldn't ignore my instincts forever, and the next week I overheard snippets of conversation during our group sessions, words that seemed at odds with the harmonious creation we were cultivating. Some participants whispered about how Mr. Henley had a reputation for getting close to those he saw talent in, only to shift their focus elsewhere, leaving them feeling abandoned. It nagged at me, the thought that everything I cherished about the project was somehow entangled in an imbalance I couldn't yet comprehend. Feeling the pressure bubble inside me, I sought solace in my journal, pouring my thoughts onto the pages as if to unravel the knotted threads of confusion. Were these cautionary tales true? Did my intuition speak of parallel realities, one where we completed this mural together in camaraderie and another where I would find myself tangled in the remnants of trust misplaced? The emotional roller coaster of creating art intertwined with the intrigue surrounding Mr. Henley served as both my safe haven and a source of restlessness. I was in love with this newfound freedom, the ability to express who I truly was, but how could I reconcile that love with the gnawing uncertainty that lingered when I interacted with him? Then came the turning point. During one of our collaborative afternoons, as we painted amidst laughter and music, I noticed Mr. Henley hovering a little too close to one young artist, a girl bursting with potential and eager to impress. The way he offered suggestions, his gaze lingering longer than it should have, stirred something primal within me. I pushed down the tightness in my chest and concentrated on my work, focusing on the colors I was mixing, but it was hard to ignore the growing rumbles of jealousy that pulsed through me. Later that week, I decided it was time to have a straightforward conversation. I invited Mr. Henley to grab coffee after our mural session. My heart pounded as the words piled up in my throat. Sitting across from him in the cafe, the aroma of brewed coffee enveloping us, I looked down into my cup, the steam swirling and curling into the air. Mr. Henley, I began, fighting the tremor in my voice, I want to talk about the project and how we navigate friendships within it. I saw curiosity spark in his eyes, and as I poured out my concerns, I expected some form of acknowledgement, but instead, he leaned back, arms crossed, with that infuriating smirk gracing his lips. You know, he said, sometimes it's easy to form connections when we believe the narrative we tell ourselves. But how often do we step back and realize it's just a story we create? Maybe your fears are just remnants of your old job. Let go of those preconceptions and enjoy the ride. His words sliced deeper than I anticipated. As I wrestled with the truth of it, I recognized that he had a point. I was holding tightly to insecurities, a product of a fear-laden past, while he seemed to tread with intention. Yet the shadows returned, turning the warmth of camaraderie into a cold unease. The conversation hung like stale air around us until he reached across the table, his hand atop mine, grounding me. In that moment, I chose to trust my instincts and release the tension gnawing at my gut. Let's realign our focus, I finally suggested, my pulse racing. From now on, let's engage everyone equally. Nobody's story should be sidelined. A flicker of something danced across his eyes, perhaps surprise or contemplation, and he finally smiled, though I sensed the undercurrent of a challenge. All right, he acquiesced, but we'll need to be mindful not to lose the spark. And with that agreement, I felt a renewed sense of hope settle within me, the decision to clear the ambiguous shadows, forging ahead with both clarity and purpose. As the mural neared completion in the weeks that followed, I found a rhythm of joy reverberating through the community, fueled in part by the newfound understanding among us. Mr. Henley and I became partners not just in the art but also in fostering honest conversations, cultivating an environment of trust, and drawing out the best in those around us. There was magic in the unexpected twists of our journey, a reminder that while red flags can signal caution, they can also unlock profound lessons about ourselves and others. As I looked around at the vibrant mural, realizing it represented not only our individual contributions but also the resilience of teamwork and understanding, I understood fully that my path was no longer obscured by shadows. Every winding road had led me here, ready to embrace whatever came next, eager as always to evolve alongside those whom I once perceived as mere acquaintances and who had, through the power of vulnerability and connection, transformed into lifelong friends. As I stood there, taking in the vibrant hues of the mural, the laughter and chatter of my colleagues floated through the air like a gentle breeze, warm and inviting. The colors seemed to dance in harmony with the embodiment of what we'd created together, a testament to our shared struggles and triumphs, each stroke representing a story, a lesson we all carried with us. Not long ago, I had felt adrift, questioning everything about my career and the person I was becoming, and now I found solace in the knowledge that I had surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared. Mr. Henley, with his chronically optimistic disposition and a knack for bringing out the best in everyone, had become a source of inspiration for me. His dedication to the project had opened a window into my own capabilities, encouraging me to explore not just my creative side, but my leadership potential as well. Together we had coordinated workshops that brought the community in to participate, allowing families to paint alongside us, sharing their hopes and dreams in splashes of color. With every paintbrush stroke, I witnessed strangers transform into friends, forging connections that would bridge gaps created by years of indifference. I remember one particular day when a young girl, no older than 8, approached me with wide eyes filled with wonder. "Can I help with your mural?" she asked, her fingers stained with shades of green and blue. I knelt down to meet her gaze, feeling a warmth swell in my chest, and said, "Of course. What do you want to paint?" She thought for a moment and declared, "A huge butterfly. One that can carry all our dreams." I glanced over at Mr. Henley, who was intently focused on the section of the wall behind me, his kind smile betraying the pure joy he felt at witnessing this exchange. That day was a reminder of the unanticipated revelations life can bring, what it means to hope and dream, and I made a point to ensure that the little girl's butterfly was as bold and colorful as her spirit, a new red flag of promise fluttering high amid life's uncertainties. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself not just growing in my new role, but stepping into a version of myself I never thought possible. I shared dinner with colleagues after long days at work, engaging in conversations that stretched far beyond mere small talk. We debated the best pizza toppings, laughed at our rookie mistakes in the early weeks of the project, and even shared our fears about the future. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an ethereal glow over the city, I found myself at a small rooftop gathering. With laughter punctuating the crisp air, I felt a growing connection, and somehow, everyone there felt like family. It struck me then, the red flags of my past had been an invitation to reevaluate, and here, I was surrounded by love and support, reaffirming that each twist and turn had sculpted a life that felt richer, more meaningful. But it wasn't just the mural or the friendships that grounded me, it was the conversations I would have with Mr. Henley about vulnerability and authenticity. He would often sit across from me, coffee mug in hand, creating space for deep discussions about our journeys. "You know," he'd say, his eyes twinkling with insights, "it's easy to focus on the flaws of others during interviews, but sometimes we forget to reflect on our own fears and insecurities that block us from seeing their true potential." I found comfort in his words, realizing that while job interviews aim to decipher a person's capabilities, they were equally a challenge for the candidate to embrace their own truth. Those reflections continued to shape my personal narrative, leading me toward resilience and understanding. I was often reminded of a quote I had once dismissed as cliché: "The only way to do great work is to love what you do." Only now did it resonate with wisdom, vibrating with the essence of community, connection, and finding joy amidst uncertainty. The mural, now a collaborative masterpiece, stood proudly as a symbol of that journey, telling of creativity birthed in friendship and the magic that emerges when we choose to let down our walls. As I indulged in that realization, I knew that the next chapter of my life was open for exploration. My mind wandered to the next community project Mr. Henley and I had been brainstorming, an arts festival that would showcase not only shared artistic expressions but also foster mentorship in the local youth. I could hardly wait. The thrill of possibility rushed through me, invigorating my spirit with hope and excitement for what lay ahead. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly aligned with my purpose, fully aware that every winding road had led me here, to this moment of connection, creativity, and clarity. Looking toward the future, I welcomed the unexpected, accepting that sometimes the most beautiful journeys unravel from the red flags we choose to face with courage and grace. I had never imagined that constructing a dollhouse would ignite such a simmering conflict between my heart and my conscience, but sometimes the lines between right and wrong blur in unexpected ways. For years, I had poured my evenings into crafting intricate projects, each requiring patience and skill. My latest endeavor was a dollhouse, a stunning replica of our own home, complete with miniature furniture I'd fashioned from scraps. I envisioned it as a delightful surprise for my niece, Lily, who was just beginning to discover the joy of imaginative play. When I finally unveiled it to my wife, Jenna, one warm Saturday afternoon, I expected her to share in my excitement. Instead, I sensed a hesitation in her eyes, a shadow of disappointment that tugged at my gut. To Jenna, this wasn't just a dollhouse, it was a reminder of the children we had been trying to have for over 3 years. It was a painful echo of hope that had turned into sorrow, the dollhouse becoming a silent witness to our unfulfilled dreams. After she walked away, I was left standing in the living room, the dollhouse perched on the table like an altar to my own conflicting emotions. I spent the next few days wrestling with how to navigate this delicate territory. Lily was such an innocent light in our lives, always brimming with energy and curiosity, her laughter a beautiful distraction from our struggles. I could easily envision her joy, radiant as she played with tiny families inhabiting the dollhouse I had designed with so much love. Yet, was it fair to give that dollhouse to her, now knowing it could unintentionally deepen the hurt in my wife? Each night, I tried to compartmentalize my feelings, but guilt would creep in each time I envisioned Lily's bright smile. Jenna and I had our discussions about starting a family, and although they were often laced with hope, they were equally filled with anxiety and uncertainty. The pain of loss was ever present, and I had never seen Jenna more vulnerable than when we talked about what it meant for our future. As the weekend neared, the veiled tension between us grew palpable. I would catch Jenna staring at the dollhouse with a mix of longing and regret, almost as if it had taken on a life of its own, weaving its way into the fabric of our unspoken struggles. Each time she looked away, I felt a pang of guilt, followed by a sudden urge to lock it away, to spare her feelings. But then I heard Lily's laughter echoing in my head, and I could almost picture her tiny hands carefully adorning the dollhouse with her imaginative touches. This created an inner conflict that kept me tossing and turning late into the nights. Finally, it came to a head at dinner one evening. We had both been quiet, lost in our thoughts, when I finally broke the silence. "What if I gave the dollhouse to Lily?" I proposed gently, gauging her reaction. It was like I had flipped a switch. Jenna's eyes snapped to me, fraught with an intensity I hadn't seen in days. "Is that really what you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, loaded with an incredulous sting. "Can it be both? Can it be a gift for Lily?
But also a reminder that we can still create happiness?"
I tried to explain, though each word felt heavier than the last, as if I were trying to lift the weight of our unfulfilled expectations with flimsy proposals. "No, but it means something different for me," Jenna replied, her voice breaking ever so slightly. There it was, the truth unveiled. It wasn't just about the dollhouse, it was about what it represented. I finally understood, it was a connection, a vision of familial joy. I watched the gravity of the moment settle between us like dust in a sunbeam. The more we talked, the more I realized that perhaps it wasn't merely an AITA scenario, it was about understanding, empathy, and navigating the tender landscape between love and loss. In the days that followed, I found myself standing before the dollhouse with a new perspective. I decided to give it to Lily but framed it differently. I crafted a small card to attach, explaining how it was built with love that could be shared, allowing Jenna to be part of that joy, yet giving me the strength to watch her smile grow brighter as our niece played. When I finally presented it to Lily, the sheer delight in her eyes made the choice worthwhile. Yet in the back of my mind, I knew that this dollhouse would always stand as a subtle reminder of our journey. It turned out that many months later, as I gifted another project to our niece, I was surprised by a simple email that Jenna sent after one of her late-night musings. "Remember that dollhouse? Lily still plays with it and loves how it looks just like our house," she wrote. "Maybe we can make that dollhouse a reality someday." And in that moment, the ache we had lived with seemed a little less heavy. The illusion had transformed into a dream, reminding us both that love, in all its forms, was something still worth building. The flickering light of the candles danced on the walls of our living room as I sat back in my chair, reminiscing about the work I had poured into that dollhouse. Each miniature detail represented not just a collection of wood and paint, but the fragments of our life together, the cozy living room with its tiny couch and absurdly intricate wallpaper that Jenna had picked out, or the kitchen with its miniature utensils that reminded me of the countless evenings we'd spent cooking side by side. It was here, in this quiet space, that I began to value those memories even more as a reflection of the love we had built amidst the uncertainty of our earlier years, a true testament to resilience. As I sipped my tea, I thought about that email. Hearing that Lily, my niece, Enjoyed the dollhouse so much reignited a flicker of warmth in my chest. It felt incredible to know that the labor of love and creativity had not only honored mine and Jenna's story but had also bonded Lily with the very essence of our lives. She was transforming those memories into her own adventures. It was a bridge connecting the past and the present, reminding us that happiness could still bloom amid the challenges. Yet, as night settled in and the stars blinked into existence outside, the familiar sensation of guilt drifted back in, like an unwelcome guest at my door. Did I make the right decision by giving the dollhouse to Jenna and not to Lily? Though initially, it felt right to honor my wife's role in my life and the sacrifices she had made, I couldn't help but feel that perhaps I'd robbed Lily of something special. Did I inadvertently create a schism between their relationship, where my decision perhaps felt like an unintentional rejection of her place in my life? Jenna, perceptive as always, sensed my unease. She slipped onto the couch beside me, her warm presence shifting the air to a more comforting space. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Her voice was laced with a gentle empathy that made it easy to confide in her. The steady rhythm of my heartbeat seemed to sync with the flickering light of the candles as I let out a heavy sigh. "I've just been thinking about the dollhouse," I admitted, my voice almost a whisper against the backdrop of the softly crackling flames. "I hope I didn't make the wrong choice by not giving it to Lily." Jenna smiled knowingly and took my hand, intertwining her fingers with mine. "You gave her something even more valuable than the dollhouse," she replied softly. "You gave her the example of building a life filled with love and creativity. You showed her that our family can create and share beauty, and that she can dream of building something of her own one day too." Her words washed over me like the gentle embrace of a wave, reassuring me that our decision was not only justifiable but also imbued with a depth of understanding that transcended simple material gifts. It was an investiture, no longer a mere dollhouse, but a symbol of our shared journey, intertwined with the hopes we had for our own family as well. The next morning struck with the warmth of a new promise, and I found myself compelled to reach out to Jenna again. It was time we brought something to life that would encompass our love and hopes for the future, a project that could merge my skills and our dreams, into something tangible. We bounced ideas back and forth across the breakfast table, laughter slipping out between bites of toast, imagining a new dollhouse, this one a miniature embodiment of everything we envisioned for Lily, but with our fingerprints all over it. Weeks sped by, and slowly but surely, as if we were crafting our story one step at a time, the dollhouse began to take shape. "What if we include a tiny version of the tree in our yard?" I suggested during one evening of construction, the air heavy with the scent of sawdust and varnish. Jenna leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm as she devised clever ways to incorporate even more details. Every piece of wood we selected, every color we mixed, felt like an affirmation of our love, a quiet promise that the foundation of the dollhouse echoed our values. On the day we finished, we stood side by side, letting the weight of our work seep in as we admired the end result. The miniature dwelling glowed warmly in the light of the setting sun, and it suddenly struck me that we hadn't just crafted a dollhouse, we had built a tangible connection that bridged the love we shared with Lily. We decided to keep it a surprise, planning to unveil it at our next family gathering, where we would finally present a reflection of our journey to the next generation. As I lay in bed that night, my heart felt unburdened at last. The ache I had once felt had turned into something soft and bright, filled with the knowledge that love, especially when shared and woven into the lives of those we cherish, expands beyond what we originally envisioned. In its own unique way, it branches out, like a tree that steadily bears fruit as it grows, and I knew, just as the ideal dollhouse stood as proof of our journey, so, too, did our story continue to blossom with each passing day. Update: several weeks later, after that surprise unveiling filled with delight and tears of joy, Jenna and I received a touching message from Lily. "Thank you for the cozy dollhouse. It makes me so happy. I hope we can always build amazing things together." It reminded us that sometimes, the act of creation is as important as the creations themselves, and the love we pour into these projects only fosters deeper connections with those who matter most. The days that followed were filled with a gentle warmth that radiated from both our home and our hearts, an unspoken promise that we were stepping into a new chapter of our lives together. Jenna, ever the thoughtful one, began leaving little surprises around the house, an unexpected note tucked into my lunch, a small bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen counter in the morning. It was her way of reminding me that while the past had its weight, the present could still be woven from joy and love. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to an artist's market down near the waterfront. I remember the vibrant colors of handmade pottery and the sounds of laughter drifting through the air as we wandered together, hand in hand. We stumbled upon a stall filled with little wooden figurines, each one hand-carved and painted with such care that they seemed to squeeze their way into your heart. Jenna picked up a small family set, a father, a mother, and 2 children. "They remind me of us," she said, a soft smile dancing on her lips. It was true, they felt like tiny echoes of our hopes and dreams for the future. We purchased them on a whim, and as we carried them back to the car, I found myself struck by the thought that every piece we gathered was another thread in the tapestry we were weaving together. The months slipped by in a blissful blur, and each week, Lily would fill our home with her laughter as she came over to play. The dollhouse had become her sanctuary, and Jenna and I often found her tucked away, deep in imaginary worlds she created with her tiny figurines. I caught glimpses of their adventures, a family picnic with the little wooden parents and their even smaller children, elaborate tea parties hosted by the family of dolls, and sometimes even the family making a trip to the beach in another imaginative play. It was enchanting to witness, like watching a painter fill the empty canvas of childhood's imagination. There was a day I returned home after a long week at work, feeling the weight of the world pressing on my shoulders. As I entered the house, I was greeted by the soft sounds of laughter echoing from the living room. I made my way there, and nothing could prepare me for the scene that unfolded. There was Jenna, seated on the floor, surrounded by colored paper, scissors, and remnants of drawings. And there was Lily, her eyes bright, fully immersed in crafting furniture for the dollhouse they had decided needed upgrades. The sight sent a wave of warmth through me. I stood there for a moment, quietly observing, allowing the tranquility of the moment to wash over me, a testament to the connections being nurtured in our little home. As that evening drew to a close, I couldn't help but think about the journey we had taken, the transitions, the trials, and ultimately, the love that had stitched us back together. With Lily beside her, Jenna looked up and smiled at me. "You have to see what we've made." In that moment, the burdens I had carried felt lighter, and the future stretched before us like an open road. Perhaps the dollhouse was not merely a beautiful construction, but rather a symbol of resilience and creativity flourishing between generations. That night, we gathered around the dining table, sharing laughter and stories, Lily's wide eyes lighting up as she recounted the adventures of her dolls. She was always the mischievous little sister in her tales, and we hung on her every word, savoring the sweetness of her imagination. Reflection on that whirlwind of emotions led me to realize, love, like creativity, is built with both care and time, and sometimes the best creations aren't the ones we see before us, but the memories we craft and the bonds we strengthen. As I watched Jenna and Lily hunched over their paper crafts, I understood that every moment we spent building something together, be it in the form of a dollhouse or in the quiet moments of everyday life, was a precious thread in the rich tapestry of our existence. And as the sun dipped gently below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across our home, I whispered a silent promise to myself, to always build, to always share, and to never forget the courage it took to embrace love in all its beautiful, messy forms. Confession: high school stunt that I'll not forget even in afterlife. They say that the memories we make in high school stick with us, for better or worse, and believe me, my most significant memory is one I never intended to create. I was a quiet kid, the kind who blended into the background, never drawing attention to myself, and certainly never in the spotlight. My best friend, Jamie, on the other hand, was a natural entertainer, full of charisma and always craving excitement. It was early autumn, and the excitement in our yearly traditions was palpable: the homecoming game, the dance, and, of course, the infamous senior pranks. Jamie was convinced we needed to make a mark, and as usual, I got swept up in her enthusiasm, even though the thought made my stomach twist with dread. The idea was simple yet bold: we would sneak onto the roof of our high school and unfurl a massive banner that would read, "Happy Senior Year," in big, bright letters. It would be harmless, just a fun little surprise for everyone attending the pep rally later that week. The night before our planned heist, I lay in bed, the weight of my decision pressing against me. I pictured the banner, fluttering proudly in the wind, the laughter we'd share afterward. But the thought of getting caught gnawed at me. What if we did this and it backfired? I brushed aside my doubts, convincing myself that this was my chance to experience something radical, to break free of my quiet shell. When the day arrived, my stomach was a cacophony of nerves. We had plotted everything meticulously. Jamie had even snuck out supplies and a few ropes to help us climb, the thrill palpable in her eyes as we approached the darkened school. The familiar brick facade loomed in front of us, taking on an ominous hue under the moonlight. We made our way to the back, and with a boost from Jamie, I clambered up to the roof first, my heart racing with adrenaline and fear. Then it was Jamie's turn. As the wind whistled through the air, I realized how high we truly were, the ground beneath us seeming like a distant dream. We worked quickly, laughter punctuating our nervousness as we unrolled the banner, our hearts soaring with each looming moment. Just as we finished, however, the silence shattered. A sound echoed, a loud thump followed by frantic barking. I scanned the surroundings, heart pounding. A security guard. Was it bad luck or a twisted turn of fate? Before we could react, we instinctively ducked behind the rooftop's edge, peering over. My mind raced with panic. We need to go down. Now, I whispered frantically. But Jamie had a different idea. We can't leave it here. Just wait and see. She pulled a small flare from her backpack, the kind used for nighttime emergencies. This is our moment, she insisted, and with that, she lit it up, illuminating the darkness. All around us, the sudden brightness felt like an invitation. But I was frozen in place, heart racing. What are you doing, Jamie? I hissed, the breath stopping in my throat as sparks flew. Just then, the door swung open, and the guard emerged, flashlight sweeping the rooftop. Panic surged through me, a wave of dread washing over my decision. But all at once, Jamie turned the flare downward, pointing it like a beacon of trouble. Hey! Look at us! She called with an adrenaline-fueled laugh, as she waved frantically. The guard's beam of light snapped toward us, illuminating Jamie's silhouette, and in a split second, my heart plummeted. Are you crazy? I shouted, scrambling for the edge as the guard shouted for backup. In the ensuing chaos, Jamie dashed back toward the roof's entrance while I stumbled in confusion, frozen in disbelief at what she had just done. In a flurry of yelling and laughter, tension crackled in the air as Jamie shouted orders, trying to persuade me to join her in escaping toward the exit. But as I hesitated, my heart heavy with dread, I realized I could never go back from this moment. Jamie pushed me to run, and together we bolted toward the roof's ledge, adrenaline pumping through our veins. But just as we reached the door, everything felt surreal. A sharp crack echoed through the night, a piece of the roof crumbling beneath me. I grasped desperately for anything to steady myself, but the floor beneath my feet gave way, and in the chaos, I tumbled downward. My last sight was Jamie's desperate face mirroring my horror as I fell, hearing her scream get swallowed by the dark. There are no words to describe that fall, but I know I hit the ground hard, and darkness enveloped me. I thought I would simply wake up in the infirmary, but when I opened my eyes, I found myself floating above it all, watching as they carried my lifeless body away. Jamie was beside herself with guilt, and I could feel her overwhelming sorrow. But I couldn't blame her, I had willingly followed her, and there's a sick irony in this realization. It was meant to be a fun memory, a fleeting moment before adulthood, and I would have liked to believe that even my absence would have a touch of humor to it. But no, it was just pain and regret. I hovered above everything, the feelings around me pulsing like an echo, binding me to the earth yet freeing me to float as an observer, grasping to make sense of choices unmade and the paths we never took. Years passed in a blur, I watched my classmates graduate, my friends drift apart, and Jamie grow into adulthood haunted by that night. In the end, I was trapped in a moment I wished never happened, aware that no matter how far beyond life I transcended, I would carry this lesson within me, that the stunts we perform in the light of boyhood adventure can whip into dark echoes, shadows of regret that linger like ghosts even into whatever might come after. In a bittersweet way, I now confess that this high school stunt was a grave reminder of how moments can dazzle us with charm, only to unveil their tragic depth when we dare to capture them. As I linger in this ethereal space, watching the lives unfold below, I promise myself, next time, I won't just blend in. I'll be the voice that reminds others to tread carefully even through the laughter. We only get one path and only one chance at choosing it, and I wish I had known that more deeply when I was alive. Update, just a few months back, I overheard Jamie speaking with a friend at the cafe. She mentioned how she'd finally decided to share the story of that night at a memorial for me. I felt a bittersweet pang. My story didn't end there, I was still part of her world, still woven into the fabric of memories, and though it hurt, it felt warm too, like a lingering embrace from the beyond. In that moment, as I lingered in the shadows, my essence intertwined with the soft buzz of the cafe, I was struck by the thought of Jamie sharing that night's tale. It had been just over a year since I had slipped quietly from the world, leaving behind a mournful ripple that affected so many. At first, I hovered close to my old friends, invisible yet present, sensing their grief, their guilt over what they could have done differently. I felt the weight of their what-ifs and if-onlys wrap around me like a heavy blanket, smothering my spirit, Yet deep down, I wanted to reassure them through the veil that it was okay. But that night at the cabin, the one I hoped they'd preserve as nothing but a joke among friends, was a swirling storm in the tapestry of my legacy. It started auspiciously, filled with the laughter and camaraderie of my senior year, all those youthful ambitions chatting together under the starry sky. We had gathered under the pretense of a harmless senior send-off, but unearthed in the dark of that gathering was reckless bravado. The plan seemed simple: impress everyone by swinging off the old bridge, the one that arched above the river, daring each other to take the leap with unspoken fears hiding behind our bravado. Jamie was one to rally the troops, her laughter a sweet bell that beckoned us to the challenge. I had always thought I was invincible, a fervent 30-second glimpse of fame that would forge bonds and memories. But that moment, with the cool water glistening below, I hesitated. The whispers of apprehension gripped me, my heart raced at the thought of the fall, its weight anchoring my spirit. Jamie, sensing my hesitation, had urged me on, flashing that confident smile of hers that melted my resolve like butter on toast. In my soul, I wished I had turned back, but instead, I took my leap of faith. As the air rushed around me, every uncertainty fell away in those blissful seconds of weightlessness, only to be followed by a horrifying crash when I met the surface of the river. The cold shocked my system, and pain surged through me like wildfire when I struck the bottom. I didn't realize the severity of my injury until I surfaced, gasping for air, my body heavy, my vision blurring with spots. Friends screamed my name against the chorus of splashing water, confusion woven into their voices. Help! Somebody call 911. Jamie's screams punctured the cacophony of chaos, but it already felt too late. The water swallowed my vision, tangled me in its depths, and as consciousness ebbed, I sensed the frantic worry in her heart alongside my own fading. I lay in silence, reflecting on the futile nature of our bravado, the fears we brushed aside in the face of friendship, only to unwittingly draft our destinies with strokes of recklessness. I had hoped to have more time, to bridge the gap that stretched between our youth and our potential. As months passed in between dimensions, my presence loomed as a bittersweet memory for my friends. Jamie's eventual decision to share the story made me feel like a whisper of an echoed promise, a reminder that life, in its fragility, demanded we chose our stunts wisely. I could see her sitting at the memorial with tearful eyes, speaking to a cluster of friends whose lives I had touched. My heart swelled with an imperfect sense of pride. I was no longer just a student remembered for my final act of folly, but a beacon urging those still living to treasure their paths, to heed the whispers in the silence as they chose how to leap into love, life, and courage. Listening to Jamie recount the laughter, the camaraderie, the mistakes we made, and the lessons learned, I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her I was grateful for the parts she preserved, for every moment stitched together with laughter. In that space, I found a sense of peace, knowing that even in this other existence, I could still connect with them through memories, stories, and love. The afterlife had taught me that the simplest moments lived deeply could resonate far beyond the limits of our years, continuing to pulse within their hearts like an eternal flame, reminding them to embrace each step of their journey, lest they find themselves leaping without purpose. As I drifted in this realm of whispers and glimpses, the warmth of those emotions enveloped me, comforting yet tinged with a haunting sadness. I often found myself revisiting that night, the laughter mingling with the taste of regret, like a bittersweet lemon slice on the tongue. At the memorial, I imagined Jamie standing in front of their gathered friends, her voice a gentle tremor as she recounted the tale of our fateful adventure. Her face would light up, reflecting the humor we shared, yet behind her laughter, I sensed the unmistakable shadow of loss, a reminder that while joy could fill the air, it was tempered by the absence of my physical presence. In this ethereal space, I understood the weight of her words, how the memories we create can illuminate even the darkest corners of grief. I wished I could manifest beside her, to place a reassuring hand on her shoulder, to give her a nod of encouragement, to tell her that sharing our story could perhaps lighten her own burden. But I reminded myself that this was not about closure for me, it was about liberation for her, a chance to reclaim our narrative, to pull beauty from the wreckage of that chaotic night. As days passed in the afterlife, a sense of harmony settled within me, a gentle balance that allowed memories to flow without judgment. My existence had shifted from one of fleeting moments to a timeless presence in the stories of others. I began to see Jamie through a different lens. She embodied resilience, a true testament to the strength that lies beneath vulnerability. I reveled in her laughter, wishing I could shower her with affirmations of the adventures we shared, the spontaneous road trips with the music cranked up, the endless nights of sharing dreams under a canopy of stars. What struck me most was how these memories didn't merely cling to Jamie, they expanded, intertwining with the lives of all those who loved me. Friends altered their paths, they hugged a little longer, held on to moments a bit tighter. Even in their trials, I could sense laughter bubbling close to the surface, reminding me that I hadn't vanished but merely transformed, becoming a part of every shared smile and tear among them. I felt their journeys unfurling, and I was a silent witness, a ghostly cheerleader, rooting them on from the shadows. Time flowed differently here, moments from my life melded with theirs, creating a beautiful tapestry rich with color and texture, vibrant with experiences lived fully, reminders that life was meant to be savored. The night of the memorial arrived, and I floated near the edge of their gathering, sensing the mingling energies around me. As Jamie took her place at the front, the room hushed, enveloped in an air thick with anticipation and emotion. She shuffled her notes, but her gaze wandered, and in that momentary pause, I felt the ripple of connection we shared. When she began to speak, her voice cracked. It wasn't just about me, it was about us, about how each laughter-filled moment had woven our lives closer. She recounted our grand plans to take over the world, our ridiculous stunts, and how we dared each other constantly to push boundaries, capturing the essence of our friendship. As her story unfolded, I could see my friends nodding, laughter breaking like gentle waves against the shore. I wished I could shout, to fill the room with the joy I felt, to tell them that their happiness was safe with me now, that I would forever cherish those memories. As she reached the climax of the night, speaking about the final act of rebellion that had brought me here, it was not guilt that washed over me, but an overwhelming sense of love. She forgave me, in front of everyone, for the consequences of that fateful moment. I felt a warmth flood through me, something new, a recognition of the beauty that can arise from chaos. In that moment, I knew we were more than the sum of our experiences, we were a constellation of moments shining bright with vulnerability, laughter, and growth. It struck me suddenly, how our lives, entwined by joy and despair, continued to push forward, an unbreakable bond nestled within the fabric of time. As the night unfolded with stories shared, tears shed, and laughter that echoed into the depths, I floated above it all, watching as Jamie found moments for herself, crafting new memories that would swell with life, allowing her spirit to soar once more. In my ethereal essence, I vowed to always be there when she needed a whisper of reassurance, to nudge her in the right direction when she hesitated. The afterlife had taught me that while I might not walk beside her physically, the connection we forged would pulse through every thought and interaction, transcending beyond existence itself. And as the night drew to a close, I felt a strange exhilaration wash over me. Perhaps this was the end of my story, but it was not an ending filled with sorrow or regret. Rather, it was a gentle beginning, and I would forever be a part of her story, living on in laughter, memories, and a legacy of love that neither time nor space could sever. It's funny how a seemingly small, mundane moment can spiral into something significant in your life. I never thought tossing out a pillow would lead me to question the very fabric of my marriage. My name is Ethan, and I've been happily married to my wife, Lily, for nearly 6 years. We have those comfortable, cozy routines, the shared cups of coffee on a Sunday morning, evening walks after dinner, and the predictable rhythm of our lives together. But lately, there was something about our shared space that had begun to grate on my nerves, particularly one fluffy, lavender-colored pillow that we kept on our bed, a gift from her grandmother. I should probably mention that it was one of those pillows that carried a constant, overwhelming scent of lavender, almost sickening at times, masking the sense of my own comforting cologne that lingered in the air. At first, it was just a quirky part of our home, but over the months, its presence turned from soothing to suffocating, especially as we prepared for a week-long family stay. I could feel my irritation bubbling beneath the surface whenever I caught sight of it. It was always there, like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. The night before her family was set to arrive, I found myself tossing and turning, the pillow's scent invading my dreams, wrapping me like a shroud. At 2 a.m, exhausted and desperate, I finally snapped. I can still vividly recall the sensation of the pillow softening in my grip as I carried it down the hallway, heart racing, my mind flooded with conflicting emotions. I felt both reckless and relieved as I swung open the door to the storage room, a small space filled with boxes and old mementos, and pitched the pillow in. It sank into the darkness like a weight off my shoulders, and I felt a jolt of sick satisfaction. I spent the next few hours in a haze of guilt and triumph, thinking about everything else I could say about our relationship, but instead, her family arrived the next morning, and Lily hadn't even noticed her pillow was gone in the chaos of greeting them. But here's where things get tricky. As the day went on, I could see the tiniest hints of concern flickering in her expression. She searched our bedroom, rifling through drawers and shrugging off the chatter of her family, who were blissfully unaware of the mounting tension. I felt that gnawing sense of unease, the kind that creeps into the bathroom mirror when you stand alone, staring at your reflection, questioning your most recent choices. When she finally confronted me, not long after dinner, her eyes were wide, searching for reassurance in my expression. "Have you seen my lavender pillow?" The question, innocent yet loaded, hung in the air between us. I hesitated but ultimately confessed, feeling the flush of shame creeping up my neck. Her silence was deafening, the confusion morphing into something sharper. Instead of comfort, I had thrown away a part of her history, a small piece of her family. And I could see the quiet devastation etched in the lines of her face. Our subsequent conversation was heavy with emotion. I could sense the spiral of hurt in her voice, revealing how that pillow had connected her to memories of her childhood, evenings spent reading on her bed, and the warmth of her grandmother's embrace. My heart sank deeper with each story she shared, a gentle reminder that sometimes love can be tangled within the tiniest details of our lives. I apologized repeatedly, feeling utterly foolish for treating her cherished memory so carelessly. We stayed up late that night, navigating through laughter and tears, acknowledging the fragility of our emotions. I never imagined that a pillow could spark such vulnerability, forcing us to confront things we often take for granted. After we reached an understanding, we decided together to continue looking for that pillow, even if it meant rummaging through the heap of nostalgia and dust lurking in that storied room. The tension eased slowly, like steam from a boiling kettle, and I found peace in the act of searching for it together. It was a journey that brought us closer, reaffirming our commitment despite the initial bump in the road. Eventually, we unearthed the pillow, still rich with its lavender scent and the remnants of a once frayed. We laughed as I improvised a half-hearted excuse about its coziness and discarded it into another box, recognizing its significance but opting for a new beginning instead. In the weeks that followed, I realized that sometimes, it's the little things that matter most and remind us we're a part of something larger. Our relationships are built on layers of memories, some heavy and some light, but all woven together in unexpected ways. And even now, whenever that scent wafts through the room, it's a reminder not just of a pillow or a memory, but how heartfelt confrontation and vulnerability can mend things we didn't even realize were breaking. Update: a few months later, I stumbled upon a similar lavender pillow during a visit to a local store, and it stirred something unexpected inside me. With a gentle hesitation, I decided to buy it and, upon presenting it to Lily with a hesitant smile, I felt the warmth return to our bedroom. She took one look at it and burst into laughter, realizing the full circle nature of our pillow saga. The new lavender pillow graced our bed, not merely as an item of comfort but as a reminder of our journey, and now, whenever I catch a whiff of it in the air, I smile at how such a simple object can hold the weight of love and understanding. As the days progressed, the lavender pillow became more than just a comfort item. It seemed to weave itself into the fabric of our daily lives, an unspoken vow that we had made to each other to communicate openly and to embrace quirks, whether they be mine or Lily's. I found myself taking more time to appreciate the little moments we shared. Each evening, as we slid into bed, I noticed how the soft texture of the new pillow cradled our heads just right, its soothing scent enveloping us both in an atmosphere that fostered intimacy and warmth. One night, I turned to Lily, illuminated by the soft glow of our bedside lamp, and found her lost in thought, her fingers gently tracing the new pillow's edge. It seemed as if she was contemplating the journey we had just traversed. I asked her what was on her mind, and after a moment's pause, she admitted that she had been reflecting on how our pillow saga had inadvertently highlighted deeper truths about our relationship, how our unique little battles often revealed the ways we could grow together. She smiled then, that beautiful, sincere smile that lit up her eyes, and I felt a wave of fondness wash over me. We began to share stories from our past, laughing at the silly, stubborn moments we'd both experienced in our previous relationships, even during awkward shopping trips where preferences clashed like magnets with different polarities. Each anecdote drew us closer. I was reminded of how important it is to embrace and accept those differences, rather than let them fester into something that could harm the bond we nurtured. Days turned into weeks, and soon the pillow became a staple in our routine. It was a silent witness to our late-night conversations, whispered secrets, and gentle arguments over whose turn it was to choose a movie. We found harmony not only in our togetherness, but also in the acceptance of our divergences. The lavender aroma became a soothing constant in our home, an aromatic thread that knitted us closer every day. Yet, like all relationships navigating their intricate paths, we did stumble upon a moment of disquietude. One stormy evening, I returned home to find the light from our kitchen casting a warm glow through the window, a familiar sight that usually warmed my heart, yet on this particular night, something felt off. As I stepped inside, I noticed the electric tension in the air. Lily was seated at the kitchen table, her gaze fixed on the window, and I could see her shoulders slightly tense as I approached. Her silence spoke volumes. She seemed deep in thought, but frustration simmered just beneath the surface. I sat down across from her, the storm outside mirroring the brewing conflict between us. "What's wrong?" I asked gently, as I reached across to touch her hand. She pulled her fingers away, an act that stung unexpectedly, making my heart race with anxiety. "It's just. Sometimes, I feel like you still don't really get it, you know?" Her words hung heavily in the air. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, unsure of how to respond, but I pressed on. We spent hours unraveling our feelings, with the lavender pillow silently softening the edges of our tumultuous discussion. It was during that exchange that I realized how vital it was to keep the channels of communication open. My fear of conflict had often led me to be passive, while Lily's sensitivity to every little slight sometimes made her seem unyielding. Together we acknowledged the growing pains that had followed us from relationship to relationship. I wanted to assure her that I was committed to understanding her emotions, but my own insecurities struggled to surface amidst the haze of tension. We finally stood on a precipice. Either side could lead to deeper understanding or further resentment. After a long, watchful silence, I finally pulled the lavender pillow close to me and smiled weakly. "Maybe this pillow has more lessons for us than we thought," I said, chuckling softly, trying to diffuse the tension. Lily snorted in response, breaking the heaviness that had wrapped around us like a fog. As the laughter bubbled between us, we recognized the absurdity of letting such small misunderstandings amplify into something bigger. Our hearts lightened, and the glow in the room shifted. We promised to keep talking, to share our feelings no matter how uncomfortable they felt. With that, we drew together, the lavender pillow positioned as a bridge rather than a barrier. It was at that moment, nestled together in shared vulnerability, that the pillow gained yet another layer of meaning, not just a symbol of comfort, but a reminder of the importance of facing conflict together, wrapped up in love and understanding. There was something powerful in that concession. I couldn't help but feel grateful for the lessons still ahead of us, knowing that through it all, our lavender pillow would remain steadfast, soaking up the experiences of both laughter and tears, ever present on our journey together, guiding us toward deeper connection. As the days turned into weeks, the lavender pillow transformed from a mere item on our bed into an emblem of our evolving relationship. Each time I settled down at night beside Lily, I could feel the softness of that pillow cradling not just our heads, but our unspoken hopes and vulnerabilities. There were evenings when we discussed everything from work frustrations to dreams for the future, our heads resting upon it as if it were a shared confidant. It seemed like that pillow had the unique ability to diffuse tension, allowing us to speak openly, something we hadn't always done in the past. One particularly cool autumn night, when the leaves outside were swirling in the brisk wind, I decided to surprise her with a small picnic in our living room, laying out a blanket and preparing some of her favorite snacks. The casual atmosphere, punctuated with laughter, created a backdrop that felt almost magical. That evening, we talked more deeply than I had anticipated, delving into the very reasons behind our arguments, our dreams, and what we actually wanted for ourselves as individuals, and for our life together as a couple. It felt liberating, to be so open, and I found myself reflecting on the pillow's role as a catalyst for our newfound honesty. I shared my worries about our future, the concerns that gnawed at me daily, fears of stagnation, and unmet expectations, while she confessed her own feelings of inadequacy, the sometimes suffocating anxiety of living up to the ideal of being the perfect partner. We both laughed at our shared insecurities, realizing that the very things we thought made us incompatible were often the realities we both faced. As the sun dipped below the horizon, our conversation transitioned to lighter topics, such as that ridiculous pillow fight we'd had the week prior and her silly matriarchal instinct that had propelled her to guard her beloved cushions. I could see the glow of affection in her eyes as she recounted the moment she had chased me around the room, the carefree laughter reverberating off the walls, the moments I realized how resilient laughter can be in the face of even the toughest arguments. However, the deeper truth was that we were still learning, still navigating each other's intricate emotional landscapes with tender care. And it wasn't just about us. It became apparent that resolving our conflicts was essential for creating a safe space where our relationship could thrive. A few months later, as winter descended and we bundled up against the chilly winds, I felt a renewed sense of connection building between us. We'd found an equilibrium, largely thanks to that humble lavender pillow, which kept us reminded that love is not just about the easy moments. We often refer back to the day I had tossed the old one, laughing that it was the catalyst for change, a moment that pushed us to confront rather than sweep aside our frustrations. Eventually, the time came to celebrate our anniversary, and I wanted it to be special, a reflection of the journey we had embarked upon together. Little did I know that this night would not only mark our love but also balm old wounds. Preparing an intimate dinner at home, I set the table with the dishes we had shared on our very first date, recreating that familiar sense of nostalgia. After dinner, I surprised her with small gifts that told our story, simple, meaningful tokens that played into our shared history, the book she'd recommended that had remained unread on my shelf, a photograph of us taken on a rainy day when we had huddled under a single umbrella, and of course, another lavender pillow, this one softer than the last. As she unwrapped her final gift, the laughter bubbled up, and in that moment, it was evident that we'd not only survived our challenges but had also learned how to love more authentically. Because it wasn't about the gifts, or the pillows, it was about the memories behind them, the discoveries we had made about who we were, and the promise of learning more together. As I looked into her sparkling eyes, I realized that every pillow, every struggle, every moment was infused with the essence of us, reminders that, just like the lavender, our love could flourish in all seasons, rooted in respect, empathy, and a pinch of humor. It was comforting. It was ours. And I felt utterly ready for whatever the future would bring, knowing that a pillow wouldn't just rest on our bed, but would always be there to soften our disagreements and cradle our dreams together. In a world that sometimes feels strained by the clamor of differing tongues, I found myself at the center of a linguistic tug-of-war with my husband, Tom. I've always had a deep passion for the German language. It had been a part of my life since I was a child, nurtured by bedtime stories my grandmother would tell me in her lilting accent. When Tom and I met in college, I was amazed at how he soaked in those stories too, admiring my enthusiasm for a culture that seemed so distant to him, an American born and bred. Over the years, that admiration blossomed into love, but in the intimacy of our shared life, our once attractive differences began to fray at the edges. Tom studied German diligently for a while but soon found the nuances overwhelming, preferring to converse in the simple, comforting rhythms of English. But I loved to practice my German, and as the months slipped into years, it became my default language, a habitual comfort zone that I didn't realize was isolating him. One quiet evening after dinner, the familiar dance of our conversation took an unexpected turn when he asked me, gently but firmly, if I could refrain from speaking German at home as it sometimes made him feel excluded. The request struck me deeply. It felt like a rejection of a part of who I was, yet his eyes had that vulnerable glint that said he was struggling with his own feelings too. I was torn. Should I honor his request, sacrificing my linguistic flair for the sake of his comfort, or could I, in good conscience, continue speaking German, even if it meant detracting from our shared space? My thoughts churned that night, the shadows of self-doubt creeping in, mimicking our sad quiet as we ended the day. Was I the asshole for wanting to indulge in something that was such a part of me, or was I merely turning my back on a plea from the heart? Days turned into a strange dance of half-phrases in English and attempts at German that felt like a betrayal to the warmth and fluidity I thrived in. I saw flashes of disappointment in Tom's eyes each time I caught myself slipping back into my cherished words. It was an unnerving cycle. Each apology towards him felt like another nail in my own heart. The bright candlelight of our evenings dimmed, booths in our favorite restaurants filled with the silence of unspoken grievances. It wasn't until a particularly stormy night that we truly cracked open the chasm between us. Sitting in our living room, rain like a relentless drum on the roof, I finally laid bare my emotions. I told him how important it was for me to retain that part of my personality, that it felt as intrinsic to my being as breathing. And there in that cozy, rain-soaked space, our hearts opened wide, he admitted that while he loved me and admired my passion, he sometimes felt like he was on the outside looking in. It was a powerful exchange, raw and painful, but it was illuminated by an understanding that only deepened our bond. We spoke until the rain slowed, weaving through layers of our emotions, fears, and desires. By the end, we found a middle ground. We agreed that I could speak German during specific times, perhaps in moments of playfulness or passion, while committing to using English for our everyday conversations. It was a compromise born out of respect and love, a promise to nurture both my passion and his feelings. Months later, wrapped in the warmth of our love and mutual respect, I found joy in the sounds of both languages echoing through our home. I realized that love, like language, is best expressed in fluidity and understanding. We created our own little world, embracing a balance that felt harmonious, a beautiful cacophony of English conversations sprinkled with delightful German whispers. Sometimes, in those quiet moments, I catch Tom grinning when I slip into German to narrate a mundane event. It's a reassuring reminder that rather than diminishing our connection, my passion is woven seamlessly into our shared rhythm. It brings us closer, sparking late-night discussions about culture and identity, far more intimate than a mere exchange of words. As for my own internal conflict, it reshaped me into a partner who learned the beauty of compromise, whose heart echoes with gratitude for the understanding we carved from our differences. And on particularly slow afternoons, we sometimes find ourselves curled up with a book of German fairy tales, and for just a moment, the language that brought me to life becomes a bridge we walk hand in hand upon. However, our peaceful coexistence faced an unexpected challenge that I hadn't seen coming, and it started rather innocuously, with a flurry of messages from a close friend who was traveling to Germany. She was sending me pictures of charming villages, bustling markets, and the kind of enchanting landscapes that always called to my adventurous spirit. Each image ignited a longing within me, stirring the remnants of my passion for the language and culture as if I were being beckoned back to my roots. I found myself daydreaming about walking among the timber-framed houses of Rothenburg ob der Tauber, sipping coffee in a quaint cafe while laboriously picking apart the intricacies of my beloved language. With each ecstatic message I shared with my husband, Oliver, I ventured deeper into my reminiscing. But then a thought began to fester like a shadow in the back of my mind. I was slipping away from our shared language, and would that not create a rift again? In a moment that felt like a culmination of tension, I set my phone down and took a deep breath, deciding to tell him. One evening, while we prepared dinner, I casually mentioned how much I missed speaking German fluently. As I said those words, I felt the sparks that often flew between us dim just slightly. He cleared his throat, his back turned to me as the garlic sizzled in the pan. "You know it's hard for me when you speak that way," he replied softly, the uncharacteristic strain in his voice tinging my excitement with remorse. I felt the warmth of the kitchen wrap around us, but a chill crept into my heart. I could see where this was headed. I was about to dance on the edges of our previous discussions, tiptoeing around old insecurities. My mind raced as I weighed the prospect of expressing my desire against the well-worn caution of his sensitivity toward my enthusiasm. In his eyes, my love for the language sometimes felt like a conflation of identities, a risk that threatened to dilute the bond we had carefully rebuilt. It was never that he didn't appreciate the beauty of it, he just felt far removed from it, as if it were a melodious tune he couldn't fully hear. I offered a kind smile and said, "How about we practice together? Just a little? It might help us connect even more." For a moment, his shoulders dropped as if a weight had been lifted, and then that familiar tension began to creep back. "I don't want to feel left out," he said, a hint of defeat in his voice. It cut deep. I had unknowingly placed him into a familiar corner, a place that meant both of us retreading an old, risky narrative. Yet, this time, I saw an opportunity. Instead of focusing on our differences, I could bring him into my passion rather than pushing him away from it. I let silence envelop us, letting his thoughts swirl in the still air of the kitchen, and when it felt right, I proposed a solution. What if I spoke as fluently as I wanted, but also shared the meaning? I could help bridge the language too, like I did before. We could find a balance. Slowly, I watched as his frown morphed into thoughtfulness. "You truly want to bring me with you, don't you?" he asked with a cautious smile. "I do," I affirmed, the sincerity ringing in my heart, resonating through the air like the faint echo of a bell. Over the next few months, we began a new chapter together, one marked by our evenings spent in our cozy living room, dictionaries and notes sprawled around us, laughter punctuating the soft hum of our conversations. I shared with Oliver the stories behind the words, the richness of expressions and idioms that had once captivated me. I watched as his eyes lit up when unraveling the humor of a joke in German or realizing the affection imbued in a simple phrase. We even began to weave our private language, a blend of English and German that was uniquely ours. But with each passing week, our discussions deepened. The language, once a bridge and then a wall, transformed into a tapestry that enveloped us in colors of understanding. We talked about identity, culture, and our values, each thread strengthening the bond we had constructed over our differences. We shared our fears, Oliver expressing the insecurities of feeling linguistically inadequate, while I confessed my worries of losing touch with my heritage. And in those moments, the air filled with a shared understanding that surpassed words. Months later, as I nestled into the warmth of our oversized couch one rainy evening, surrounded by books and a steaming cup of herbal tea, it struck me how beautifully we had rebuilt our connection. The gray clouds draped outside, yet inside, it felt eternally sunlit with warmth and understanding. With my skin tingling from the memories of our journey, I decided to share our progress in a post on a Reddit community that focused on relationships. I titled my thread "A myth asshole wibda if I only spoke German to my husband despite him requesting I don't?" But as I typed, it felt less like a plea for validation and more a celebration of a love that had transcended language barriers. Lastly, I fondly recounted our journey, the blending of cultures, how we found our rhythm again, and I concluded with a question to the community: have you found harmony in your differences? As I posted it, a sense of relief washed over me. I had made it through a tumultuous chapter, and now we stood, hand in hand, ready to explore the landscapes of our vibrant, shared life together. Soon after, I received a wave of supportive and insightful replies, many expressing similar experiences, which encouraged me further. Later that night, as I drifted off to sleep, I looked over at Oliver, his peaceful face illuminated by the moonlight streaming through our window. I realized anew that love, much like language, is a journey, not a destination. Each step we took together unveiled not just the beauty in our differences, but also the harmony that lay within, patiently waiting to be discovered. As the soft glow of dawn began to fill our bedroom, I stirred awake to find Oliver already up, immersed in his morning ritual of brewing coffee. The rich aroma seeped through the air, weaving itself into the fabric of my thoughts. I watched him from the comfort of our rumpled bed, the way the sun kissed his tousled hair, and felt a swell of affection. This was our life, a gentle dance of routine and spontaneity. But underneath the surface, excitement tinged with a sense of trepidation lingered. Today marked the beginning of my exploration into joining a local German conversation group. After my post online, a number of people had urged me to enhance my language skills further, not just for my own fulfillment but for the bridge it could build between Oliver and me. I knew he wanted me to improve my English as well, and while he supported my passion, there was still a mutual understanding hovering between us that needed to be navigated carefully. The group met in a cozy cafe downtown, where laughter mingled with the sounds of clinking cups and the soft whir of the espresso machine. As I stepped inside, the chatter seemed to swallow me whole. I spotted a table filled with fellow language adventurers, each with a story and a shared commitment to embracing a new tongue. With a nervous smile, I slid into an empty chair, the warmth of the gathering slowly enveloping me. Conversations took flight as we practiced phrases, stuttered over difficult pronunciations, and stumbled through the occasional awkward silence, laughter breaking the tension. I felt a spark of something familiar igniting within me, an eagerness to embrace the nuances. It was exhilarating, yet I couldn't shake the thought of Oliver, wondering if he would feel left out or if he was simply letting me fly on this new adventure. That evening, as we settled back into our routine, I couldn't help but share my excitement with Oliver. His face lit up with a genuine smile, yet beneath the enthusiasm, I sensed a flicker of apprehension. "It sounds amazing, actually," he said, pausing as if weighing his words carefully. "But promise me you'll still speak with me in English when we're home. I want you to feel free to express yourself with me fully." His earnest gaze met mine, sincerity draping each syllable in warmth. As I nodded, I could feel the weight of our unspoken understanding, a desire to balance my passion with the importance of our connection. However, the next few days were an exercise in self-discipline and compromise. I found myself wanting to slip into German more often, the phrases just at the tip of my tongue, eager to dance into the spaces we shared. But in doing so, I sometimes caught a glimpse of Oliver's discomfort, the furrowed brow when he couldn't follow my excitement, the brief silence when I spoke a sentence too rapid in my newfound confidence. This tug of war between my zeal and his request started to weigh on my heart. Were the walls I erected to protect my love inadvertently turning impenetrable? After a particularly frustrating attempt at explaining a simple story in German to him, resulting in more confusion than connection, I felt a rush of guilt clawing at my insides. I walked to the window, looking out at the twilight blending into night, the world outside a tapestry of muted colors. It struck me then how language, glorious as it could be, was a tool meant for connection, not division. Perhaps I had let my excitement overshadow the core of our relationship, and a wave of remorse flooded over me as I thought of our conversations where he patiently navigated between my two languages. That night, I made a decision. I turned to Oliver, who was curled up with a book of his own, and took a deep breath. "How about we create space for both?" I suggested softly, and he glanced up, surprise flickering across his features. "Let's set aside specific times for German. And when you're tired or lost, I'll be right here, ready to help you navigate back to English. Let's learn together." His eyes shone with a mix of understanding and relief as a smile broke across his face. In the following weeks, we embraced this newfound rhythm. Each night, We dipped into German for a little while, navigating through stories, fairy tales we both loved, or snippets from the news that intrigued us. When the words stumbled, we laughed until our stomachs hurt, and I cherished the look in his eyes as they sparkled with shared discovery and patience. Our evenings were filled with light-hearted attempts at pronunciation, playful teasing when one of us would mix up words, and the comforting realization that no matter the language, love threaded itself seamlessly between us. As I lay in bed amidst the whispers of night, I smiled, feeling a warmth blanket around my heart. I had aimed for fluency, but what I had found was something richer, an intimacy forged through compassion and understanding. Each mistake became a stepping stone, revealing the path that lay not just to understanding German, but deeper connections that breathed life into our relationship. The journey of language became a metaphor for our love story, filled with missteps yet painted with the beauty of growth, both together and individually. And as I reached for Oliver's hand, I realized that love, like language, was a living, breathing entity, forever expanding, ever changing, but always anchored in the safety of shared affection. I never thought a simple question about showering could unravel so much about my life, but here we are. It all started the day my roommate, Jake, casually asked in our group chat if everyone preferred to shower in the morning or at night, and I replied with a nonchalant, "At night, obviously. Who wants to start their day all wet and uncomfortable?" Little did I know that my humorous quip would ignite a minor controversy, leading to a rift between us and uncovering deeper, more personal conflicts within myself. You see, Jake and I had shared a small apartment for about a year now after college, thrown together by the randomness of online roommate listings. He was easygoing, while I tended to be more of an introvert, preferring the solace of late-night gaming marathons to the noisy bustling of parties. That night, I could almost see the flicker of indignation from him through my phone screen as he fired back about how refreshing and invigorating a morning shower could be, creating an almost evangelical fervor in the chat. As playful banter turned into a back and forth that had others joining the thread like old schoolmates reunited, I found my dissatisfaction with the discussion pooling into something darker. Wasn't this just a harmless debate? Yet, the more we discussed it, the more I felt my own insecurities bubble up. After all, my nighttime showers were more than a choice of cleanliness, they became my sanctuary, my shield against the day that had just passed. They were prayers whispered in the steam, reflections shared with the dull hum of water against porcelain. Realization hit me, it wasn't the water itself but the comfort I found in solitude that I protected fiercely. Days passed, and that small spark of humor in a Facebook thread morphed into silent tension. I could sense Jake's frustration swirling about like a summer storm he kept bottled up, and soon it spilled over into our daily interactions. He started to leave for work earlier, making it apparent that my nighttime routine was becoming an inconvenience, and I felt that old familiar sting of guilt prick my conscience. The idea of me being selfish over something so trivial gnawed at my mind, and I wondered if I was wrong to cling so tightly to my rituals. One evening, after another long day of indecision and hours spent analyzing what seemed like a ghost of a conversation, I broke down, standing in the bathroom, water cascading down my back, the temperature just hot enough to sting, barely feeling its familiar embrace as I wrestled with my feelings. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Jake read, "Let's talk." Unease settled in my stomach as I switched off the shower, suddenly conscious of the silence surrounding me. The conversation we desperately needed felt like a freight train barreling toward us, ready to collide. Sitting across from him at the kitchen table later that night felt like stepping onto a tightrope. I stared into his furrowed brows, willing myself to speak. First, fearing the conflict would only wash over us again if I didn't clear the air. Before either of us could speak, he let out a short laugh tinged with frustration and said, "I apologize. I didn't mean to make it feel like there was a right or wrong way to shower." His words hung in the air, and it felt like a release. I hadn't expected to find comfort in laughter amid a dispute, but it worked, and soon we were able to share perspectives, me recounting my childhood memories of feeling lost in an overwhelming world, where my safe haven lay in those evening rituals. He talked about his love for Dawn and how it energized his spirit, and for the first time since this began, we listened rather than debated. As the conversation shifted from a simple showering preference to something beautifully profound, we learned about one another in ways that surprised us both. The interaction ended with a gentle understanding, no solutions, just acceptance. We agreed to let our different routines coexist. I would respect his morning preference while finding space to shower at night, and surprisingly enough, I felt lighter. The emotional shadows that had clawed at me lifted, showing that our differences weren't barriers but rather opportunities for compassion and growth. Reflecting on those moments now, I realize how much we often overlook the power of small things, how the simplest questions can lead to deeper understanding and connection over something as mundane as a shower schedule. It's an ongoing balance we're learning to strike in our shared lives, reminding me that personal rituals, no matter how small, are just as vital as the space we foster with others. As I wash away the day each night, I can still feel that fresh hope for what lies ahead, and in the morning sun, I can always sense a little invigorating joy. Life has a peculiar way of exposing what we truly need and teaching us that sometimes, even in the trivialities, we find our most profound truths. Update: it's been several months since that incident, and I wanted to share how our relationship has transformed. We've navigated our differences thoughtfully, discussing everything from chores to routines without resentment. Even negotiating bathroom time has turned into a communal ritual where we leave uplifting notes for one another. So if you're wondering whether there's a right way to shower, the answer is simply, whatever keeps you grounded. It was a crisp autumn evening when I realized just how much our little ritual had changed the dynamic in our home. The sunlight had surrendered to an early dusk, casting a soft golden hue through our living room windows. I reclined on our well-loved couch, a spot where countless discussions had unfolded, and listened to the rustling of leaves outside, a gentle reminder of the world continuing its cycle. My thoughts drifted to Alex, sitting at the kitchen table, pencil poised over a new notepad filled with doodles and half-formed ideas. He had taken up writing recently, spurred by our shared commitment to appreciating the small joys in life. There was something deeply comforting in watching him, a mundane moment that felt almost sacred in its simplicity. Just last week, we had joked about me showering in the morning while he preferred the nighttime cleanse, yet today, the topic felt a bit richer, a bit deeper. I smiled at how we'd turned something as trivial as shower preferences into an exploration of our personalities, how I thrived in morning routines, using that time to gather energy for the day ahead, while he found solace in the water's warmth as he washed away the weight of the world. It was a playful battle that had transformed into a comforting acknowledgement of our differences. Each note we left for the other became a reminder that it was perfectly okay to clash in some areas, as long as we supported one another through it. My heart swelled with gratitude as I recalled those late-night discussions after I'd come from my morning shower, the way he would tease me about my overly cheerful attitude, but ultimately end up smiling at my boundless enthusiasm. Suddenly, the kettle whistled, and Alex poured himself a cup of tea, a daily ritual that we both cherished, paired perfectly with those brief moments of connection. As he walked over and handed me a warm mug, our fingers brushed together, sending a flash of warmth up my arm that transcended the chill in the air. I couldn't help but marvel at how simple acts of care had bridged the gap that once felt insurmountable, a soothing balm for old grievances. "Hey," I said softly, "do you remember that week when we almost moved out separate ways because of shower timing?" The question hung in the air, and I watched as he chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Yeah, how ridiculous was that? All over a shower." His laughter was contagious, and soon we were both grinning at how we had almost let something so trivial unravel the fabric of our relationship. It felt reassuring to know that our love had grown stronger rather than strained, forged in discussion and subtle compromises, reminding us that we are imperfect creatures working together to create a harmonious existence. Doing the dishes next to one another had become a place of laughter and shared stories instead of a dreaded chore. Morning chores transformed into affectionate exchanges where we shared dreams and ambitions. As we sat there, sipping our tea and allowing the warmth to seep into our bones, I thought back to our first months together when I had been so rigid in my routines and he, in his. Life had a funny way of teaching, didn't it? We had grown, molded by our conversations and the light-hearted notes exchanged in the bathroom, a playful nudge toward understanding. Now, our mornings began with warmth, not just in water but in attitude, as we greeted each new day as friends and partners, no longer battling for control over a single moment of quiet. Sometimes, before climbing into bed, we'd take a moment to acknowledge those notes through whispers in the dark, a quiet acknowledgement of how far we had shifted from our old stances. I marveled at how our relationship was no longer simply about shower timing but about meeting one another in all our complexities, learning to dance through the friction. And as the moonlight filtered through the curtains of our cozy home, I realized that we'd not only learned about how to shower together, but also how to love without reservations, how to embrace our idiosyncrasies and transform them into stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. In the end, I imagined any asking about the right way to shower would yield a simple truth. It wasn't about the timing or the order of events, it was about merging routines with the love that bathed them in understanding. And maybe that mattered more than a perfectly scalding shower or the ideal evening ritual. What mattered was how we chose to show up for one another, day after day. As I placed the empty teacup down, our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw our future stretching out before us, a tapestry woven from the threads of shared quirks, affection, and understanding. The world beyond our little home could keep spinning chaotically, but together, we had found a tranquil center, our shower of love above all else. As I sank back into the soft embrace of the couch, just beneath the warm light of our modest living room, I couldn't help but smile at how far we'd come since that initial shower debate. Kevin and I had always been an odd couple. He was the nocturnal artist, paint-splattered and lost in dreams of faraway worlds, while I preferred the precision and calm of daylight, my mind firing off plans like a pinball machine. But that stark difference, as irksome as it had once seemed, became our greatest strength. Together, we had cultivated a delicate dance of compromise and love that seeped into every facet of our daily lives. We had showered each other's worries away over countless mornings and evenings, sharing masks made from avocados and honey, turning what could have been mundane into a cherished tradition. It's strange to think that something as simple as agreeing on shower times could lead us here, sipping chamomile tea on a lazy Saturday, enjoying the comfortable silence that only partners can share. And yet, it was during one of those particularly rainy weekends, when the world outside was blanketed in gray, that a challenge nudged at our peaceful existence. It all began when we decided to tidy up the clutter that had accumulated in our tiny apartment, a process filled with nostalgia as we sifted through memories, old photographs, forgotten receipts, and trinkets swapped during travels long past. It was cathartic, yet strangely revealing. In a forgotten shoebox, I uncovered a letter from my grandmother, a woman whose wisdom often lingered in my heart and shaped my decisions. She had always extolled the virtues of patience, urging me to embrace both the mundane and the extraordinary. Tucked within the letter was a small envelope containing a photograph of her, young and radiant, showering under a rain-soaked sun, an expression of pure bliss etched on her face. Feeling nostalgic, I shared the photo with Kevin, leaning into the warm light of our dining table, where we had discovered so many of life's little treasures together. His eyes danced with curiosity as he absorbed the innocence of my grandmother's joy. "You know," he said, picking up a crumpled photo we had taken during a spontaneous road trip last summer, "this reminds me of that time we ended up at that little diner, the one with the bad coffee and the amazing pie." His words somehow ignited something in me, a realization that perhaps our cherished routines weren't just about the tasks we performed but the space we carved out for each other's memories. Over the next few days, as we dug deeper into the heart of our belongings, I began to notice something that made my stomach twist in knots. The more we unearthed, the more I felt the edges of Kevin's world encroaching upon my own, his sketchbooks piled high, unfinished canvases leaning against walls like silent witnesses. It was beautiful, this mountain of his creativity. It was also chaotic. The blending of our lives had created a beautiful mess, and yet I was surprised to find that I wanted more clarity, an oasis of order in the thrumming current of our differing habits. I hesitated, unsure if voicing this desire would unearth resentment or frustration from Kevin. At the same time, I feared that even questioning our newfound tranquility would send ripples across our carefully crafted relationship. How could I express this without sounding ungrateful? One evening, as the faint light of day slipped outside the window, I summoned the courage to broach the subject. "Hey, love, can we talk about our space?" I began softly, watching his hands pause mid-sketch. His expression hardened slightly, a flicker of defensiveness crossing his features, and I had a second of panic, my heart racing with the fear of undoing everything good we had built. But there was kindness in his voice when he responded, "Yeah, I think that's important." We both took a moment to breathe, tapping into the patience my grandmother had once preached. The conversation unfolded like a delicate flower, careful petals yielding to disclose deeper thoughts. We discussed how each of us viewed our personal space, the orderly retreat I sought and the creative chaos that Kevin thrived in. By the time we wrapped things up, the remnants of doubt had transformed into an understanding that felt like healing. We spent the following Saturdays rearranging our home, consciously carving out pockets of solitude amid his expansive imagination. He set up an art corner that faced the balcony, allowing sunlight to pour over his sketches while isolating them from the clutter I had wrested away with tenderness. I soon realized each little corner brought an essence of both our worlds to life. My tidy nook filled with books and plants reflected calm, while his vibrant canvas, peppered with splashes of color, became an almost sacred space of inspiration. Life, with all its routine showers and soft moments of understanding, began to shift yet again, reflecting the beauty of our harmonious union. What I had feared may disrupt us transformed into the roots of genuine growth, watering both our styles without overshadowing either. With the rain tapping rhythmically against the window, I sat beside him, watching the world drip outside, a world that still spun chaotically. We were now crafting something deeper, balance and love, proof that asking for what you need doesn't mean you're breaking, but rather evolving. Each brushstroke he painted felt like our journey, and I couldn't help but see the future extending before us, full of color and light. Months down the road, as another rainy Saturday unfurled before us, I glanced over at Kevin, who was engrossed in his latest masterpiece, colors dancing across the canvas with the same vibrancy of our intertwined lives. I turned my gaze back to my own quiet space, the edges softened beneath the glow of a reading lamp, and felt a profound gratitude filling the air around us. We had showered each other with the understanding of our differences, and it made the world outside worthwhile. So, if you find yourself struggling to merge lives and routines, remember that it's in the honoring of those differences that the richest layers of love often reveal themselves. It all began one breezy afternoon, the golden light softly washing over my living room as I contemplated the simple yet profound rules that shaped my family dynamics, rules I had never quite realized would lead me down a rabbit hole of conflict and introspection. I had always treasured the close bond we had with my mother, a relationship built on love, memories, and the occasional clash of strong wills. But one evening, as my 8-year-old daughter, Alice, casually referred to my mother as honey during dinner, I felt a jolt, a dislocation of sorts within my heart. To most, this would seem harmless, a term of endearment seamlessly woven into the fabric of family life. To me, however, it opened a floodgate of unresolved emotions. I grew up witnessing my mother's complicated lifestyle, riddled with bouts of neglect and fierce independence that often made her more of a friend than a caregiver. I never questioned the absence of authority in her role, and yet, hearing Alice call her honey felt like an invitation to intimacy that my mother had not earned, a privilege I feared she would abuse. As the days rolled on, I wrestled silently with my feelings, peering into the depths of my mother's approval-seeking behavior, a pattern that had burned me time and again. I decided it was time to set boundaries that would shield my children from the unpredictability of her affection, and so I told Alice, "Sweetheart, it's not okay to call Grandma honey. Her name is Grandma." For Alice's naturally curious and sensitive nature, this prompt seemed a perplexing riddle. Her eyes brimmed with confusion, and I instantly felt a twinge of guilt. Yet I knew this was one of the only ways I could protect my children from the emotional instability that lurked beneath my mother's charming exterior. I imagined possible scenarios, Alice running to her honey for comfort, only to have those sweet moments twisted into half-hearted fits of affection that would leave her confused and wounded. That alone rearranged the pieces of my heart as I guided my daughter to navigate relationships with care. Yet, my gentle restrictions, which I viewed as necessary, did not sit well with my mother. She confronted me during one of our weekly calls, her usually warm voice growing strident as I could tell her feelings were hurt. "Why can't my grandchildren call me what they want?" she asked, her emotional undertones thickening the air between us. I felt compelled to defend my position, explaining that I wanted to maintain clear boundaries for their well-being, citing a few painful memories from my childhood that felt necessary to share. Instead of understanding, however, my revelations only fueled her resentment, breeding a kind of animosity that I had hoped to avoid. "You think you're protecting them," she snapped, "but all you're doing is pushing me away." Caught in that tsunami of emotions, the guilt over distancing my children from their grandmother and the insistence on maintaining their mental health, I found myself questioning whether I truly was the villain in this tale. Days passed, with tension hanging palpably in the air, until, one evening, my husband offered insight that struck a nerve. "You're just creating a cycle," he said softly, prompting a cascade of realizations. In my zeal to protect my children, I had inadvertently mirrored my mother's behaviors, shutting her out just as she once shut me out. As the weeks rolled into months, I let go of my rigid stance and, with a mixture of trepidation and hope, confronted my mother once more. We met in a local cafe, a place where we could relay the unspoken words over warm cups of coffee. I took a breath, recognizing the fragility of our interaction, and nervously explained, "I want to share this love with my children but fear for their emotional health." To my surprise, she opened up, acknowledging her past mistakes, and in that moment of vulnerability, I could see her as a flawed human being rather than the formidable figure I had cast her as for so long. We talked for 3 hours, our words weaving a new understanding among the crisscross threads of hurt and love. By the time we left that cafe, we made a gentle pact. My children could call her whatever felt right, but curiosity would remain the guide. If my mother's affection strayed into chaos, I would be there to help them navigate through the tumult, lifting them back onto their feet when the light dimmed. It was a delicate balance, but so long as we kept communication coherent, there was a glimmer of hope for a new chapter. Months later, my kids call her Grandma, Honey, and sometimes even Grandma Honey on whimsical days. It brings a smile to my face, a small triumph of compromise over conflict. Reflection has carved deeper insights into my soul, and if I've learned anything from this saga of boundaries, it's that relationships thrive where understanding flourishes, even from the pains of our past. As I gaze at my mother with a heart filled with tenderness rather than resentment, I remind myself that although nobody is perfect, the love we share can still bridge the gaping chasms left behind by misunderstandings. I've become the guardian of my children's choices, but in opening the door just a crack, I've also invited my mother into a more stable chapter of our lives, one where love doesn't have to be earned or lost, only shared. Our evenings began to take on a new rhythm, one where laughter resonated through our home in a different way. The clinking of dinner plates mingled with soft conversations, and during those times, I watched my mother transform before my eyes. The rigid demeanor she wore like a shield slowly melted away, revealing glimpses of the woman I remembered from my childhood, the one who would spin fantastical tales of her youth and make blueberry pancakes on Saturday mornings. Each time my children called her Honey, it felt like they were shaping their own relationship with her, possibly one built on affection rather than the fraught history I had held onto for so long. I began to understand that the term didn't erase the years of disappointment, rather, it was a step toward redefining connection, an invitation for both my mother and my kids to forge a bond that could empower them all. It wasn't easy. I still felt pangs of concern whenever my mother slipped into old habits, her sharp tongue ready to cut down any misstep with a quip that could sting. One evening, as my daughter, Lily, baked cookies with my mother, I caught a glimpse of their interaction from the kitchen doorway. My mother had an apron tied around her waist, flour dusting her cheek as she helped Lily roll out the dough. They giggled so genuinely that it made my heart swell, but almost immediately, a familiar icy apprehension chilled my joy. Had I truly invited someone who had disappointed me in the past into my children's sacred spaces? But as I sat watching, I realized that this was my mother trying to change, to fit into a narrative that no longer centered on her past failures but on the potential for love and acceptance. That realization sparked something in me, an acceptance that some relationships are worth bending rules for. Gradually, I found myself loosening the tight grip I had on my judgment, allowing myself to witness moments that reminded me of the shared humanity between us. One rainy Saturday, my mother and I sat on the porch while the kids splashed in puddles, the sound of their laughter muffled by the patter of raindrops on the roof. We exchanged small talk, and when I brought up her choices in the past, she surprised me with an unexpected openness. "I know I messed up," she said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "I didn't have the tools or the knowledge then. I want to learn, not just for myself, but for them. For you." I was taken aback. The recognition of her shortcomings was something I had longed to hear, yet it felt surreal to finally take a step together in something resembling vulnerability. There was no dramatic confession, just a genuine attempt to connect over our shared history. I felt a lightness in my chest, a whisper of hope that perhaps we could build something stronger together. A week later, while we picnicked in the park, Lily climbed into my mother's lap, looking up at her with awe. "Honey," she called sweetly, "can you tell us about the time you met the runaway dog?" My mother's eyes sparkled at the thought, and as she started to weave a story filled with charm and whimsy, I noticed the children were completely engaged, hanging on to each word and all the playful embellishments. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel the urge to guard the children from their grandmother. I realized I was letting go of the fear that had gripped my heart for years. I smiled, absorbing the moment, where laughter echoed through trees swaying gently in the summer breeze, and I began to see the foundation of a relationship being built right before my eyes. It was with a sense of cautious optimism that I concluded this journey. The path to evolving our relationship was not without bumps. We often still navigated through the minefield of miscommunication and unspoken grievances. Nevertheless, I held on to the belief that building trust took time and that love could flourish amongst the fragile roots of our shared past. Days turned into weeks, and the more I witnessed my children's genuine affection for my mother, the deeper my resolve grew to encourage it. Sure, we faced setbacks along the way. Old habits die hard, and sometimes my mother would slip back into sarcasm or dismissive remarks. But I could intervene, guiding her tone or redirecting the emphasis in our conversations without that ever-present burden of guilt. As the seasons shifted, so did our family dynamic. Thanksgiving rolled around, and as we gathered around the table, Lily took it upon herself to have everyone share what they were thankful for. When it was my mother's turn, she looked at the room full of grateful eyes, and with a quivering voice, she said, I'm thankful for second chances, for a family that could forgive and, more importantly, for the love that connects us even when we have the past whispering in our ears. In that moment, my heart swelled, a quiet comfort settling in, as I recognized that perhaps the new chapter we were all seeking wasn't just about rebuilding what was lost but also about discovering new facets of each other. Watching my children engaging with their grandmother, embracing her as honey, taught me that healing takes time and that love is a tapestry woven from acceptance and understanding. I realized I'd become less the guardian of their choices and more a nurturer of their relationships, guiding them through the fragile landscapes of familial dynamics with newfound wisdom. And as I reflected on the journey we shared, smiling at the laughter resonating between the walls of our home, I felt a sense of peace. Healing and connections are not linear paths, they are messy, intricate, and absolutely worth every twist and turn. In the months following, we continued to foster this merging of families, keeping communication open and embracing one another's imperfections. Life hadn't magically transformed overnight, but we had discovered ways to create a rhythm that celebrated our unique individualities. I dared to believe that, while relationships are complex, they are also transformative. Each time I caught my children calling my mother honey, I would smile softly, knowing that they are building bridges that I had once thought irreparable. In doing so, we were not just healing old wounds but laying the groundwork for a beautifully intricate tapestry of love that could stretch across generations. As we moved further into this new chapter, I watched my children blossom in the forgiving warmth of their grandmother's embrace. It was a subtly beautiful transformation. At times, I would overhear them whispering secrets to her, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves outside our window, painting a picture that felt rich and vibrant. It was a far cry from the tense atmosphere we used to have, filled with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Instead, there was a lightness in the air, a tangible ease that swept through our home like a gentle breeze. My mother began to impress upon them the same stories that once wove the fabric of my own childhood, tales of adventure and mischief shared with my siblings that transformed even the simplest moments into cherished memories. I could see it in her eyes. Each mention of honey from my kids was a reminder that she could still be a good grandmother, that love could be expressed in many ways, and that forgiveness was not the absence of past hurts but the acceptance of them. It wasn't without its awkward moments, of course. There were times when I couldn't help but wince, memories of her difficult past rushing back like an unwelcome tide. But then I would remind myself that everyone is just a story waiting to be rewritten, and change, however small, deserves to be celebrated, even if it takes time to feel whole. One particularly serene afternoon, we gather in the living room, the sun pouring warmth through the windows, casting a golden hue on the walls. My children are sprawled on the floor, building a tower of blocks that seems to teeter precariously, while my mother sits nearby sipping her tea, her laughter ringing like the clinking of wind chimes. I glance at her, noticing how gently she guides their hands, offering suggestions instead of commands. "If we put this one here," she says with a smile, "it's going to topple less." I remember how, in my youth, her words often felt heavy, but now they dance lightly around the room, filled with affection. In that moment, I see the lessons unfolding, the ways in which they are teaching her patience just as much as she is teaching them about creativity and balance. It dawned on me that this new dynamic wasn't solely an opportunity for my children to connect with their grandmother but was healing me too, reshaping the broken pieces of our relationship into something sturdy and dependable. I allowed myself to breathe deeply, relishing the moment, when suddenly my daughter, engrossed in her building project, turned to my mother and casually said, "Hey, honey, can you help?" The word slipped out with the familiarity of an everyday phrase, and I could see the way my mother's eyes sparkled with joy, startled and delighted all at once. There was no hesitation in her smile, it was genuine and pure. "Of course, sweetheart," she replied, scooting closer to help. A warmth unfurled inside me, and for the first time, I didn't flinch on hearing that name float from their lips. Instead, I recognized it as a marker of progress, a gentle reminder that my mother was patching the wounds of her past, stitching herself into our lives, and that I was finally letting go of some of mine. As days turned into weeks, I found that the small things began to shift. Our collective laughter echoed more freely, the unturned corner of my maternal heart felt lighter, and those earlier fears that had once held me captive began to dissolve like mist under the sun. I watched my mother slip more easily into her role, her hesitations fading with each visit. The kids grew more confident in their affection, using names of endearment that bounced off the walls and wrapped around us like a favorite blanket. Each honey became a reverberation of love and an acceptance that we were all imperfect in our ways, doing our best to stitch together the tapestry we called family. There was no grand epiphany, no fixed moment that illustrated our triumph, but rather the quiet realization that connection can flicker ignited even in seemingly insurmountable darkness through small acts of love and openness. As well as the growing comfort of understanding our shared journey, it was in these moments, simple yet profound, that I learned we had become a constellation, each star a unique point of light, interconnected by a shared history and new aspirations. And as I tucked my children into bed that night, their giggles still swirling in the air, I knew that we had turned a page in our story, one full of potential, ready to explore what it means to be a family in the truest sense. I whispered, "Good night, my loves," and as they snuggled deeper into their blankets, I couldn't help but smile, feeling the threads of our tapestry weave tighter around my heart. I closed the door softly behind me, letting the echoes of their laughter linger in the hallway, and for the first time in a long time, I felt an all-encompassing peace settle over me, a delightful realization that in the end, love always finds a way to triumph over pain.